David from the Cotswolds. Just to keep you updated, finally got through on the number Sleepy Joe gave out, rang it up, blow me, Rachel Reeves answered. So I said to her, it's a disaster. She said, you're telling me, and put the phone down.
Brilliant. The people that listen to this show are brilliant.
I love it.
I mean, you've seen Joe Biden giving out the emergency phone number in California.
It's just...
I mean, you know, as somebody said, by the time he's got the nuclear codes right, America will be flattened.
He's gone, don't you worry.
1-800, no, excuse me, 3... it'd be great. Keir Starmer to count him down, I suppose. You could do that.
Oh, my God, everyone's fall asleep.
Yeah, Alex Phillips is here. She'll take you through the next 3 hours. I'll see you on Monday. Plank of the week tonight. See you later.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Well, hello. Good morning, one and all. I was on holiday last week, relaxing in the sunshine in my volcanic lair, sipping on a pina colada, glued to what was going on X. It was like a whole sort of played-out cinema piece, a spectacle, an epic, a saga, the Battle of the Titans, opinions flying all over the place. And now we learn that the Home Office have gone, well, we better have a look at Elon Musk. He seems like a far-right extremist. Not just that, the counter-terrorism police are after him. Of course they are, because he is a terrorist. I mean, it's just mad. What has the world come to? The guy's literally like, you got a rubbish Prime Minister. Yeah, we noticed. And also, Western civilization's in a bit of trouble. Well, yeah, but we're not allowed to talk about it. Ooh, he has. And that means that, I don't know, 5 and 6 and the Stormtroopers, they're all after him, aren't they? Oh, it's just... Honestly, I thought after the riots, when he called all of us far-right, that he got the message. We didn't really like it. But no, he's calling the most powerful man on earth far right now. Everyone's far right, aren't they? And it's just red rag to a bull. Do you honestly think Elon's going to go, oh dear, Starmer thinks I might be a bit, fascist. I better crawl back into a box and not say anything. No, he's the champion of free speech, something that Starmer needs to learn. Anyway, welcome to the show. I'm Alex Phillips. You are with Talk, of course, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your smart speaker, on your connected devices, on our snazzy little Talk app. If you haven't downloaded it, go on. Why have you not done it yet? It's really cool. You can just sit there and go through the whole back catalogue of common sense, catch up on whatever you may have missed, just jump in, jump out with full liberty, because that's what we love, isn't it? We love a bit of liberty. I'm with you live from now up until 1 o'clock. Now, coming up on the show, good old Rachel from accounts. She is off to China. Forget the fact the economy is basically in flames. No. She's going to glad hand with Xi to revive closer ties with the nation and apparently boost Britain's economy amid turmoil in UK bond markets. I mean, really? Why is she cozying up to a brutal communist regime that wants to meddle in our affairs, spies on us, nicks our intellectual property, completely undercuts our economy? The reason we don't make things anymore and have no economic growth is because they've outsmarted us, because, I don't know, they use slave labour and work camps and stuff like that. And yet she's over there to go, oh, dear President Xi, please can we buy some more solar panels and windworms? Yeah, the very same windworms that weren't turning the other day when there was no wind, which almost put us into blackout. She may as well just take the whole treasury and open up the national coffers and say to President Xi, how much do you want from this? And Sir Keir Starmer, of course, he has refused to stop accusing Liz Truss of crashing the economy. That's despite her sending a cease and desist letter. And you just have to look at the government gilts and the market we have today. Who's crashed the economy, sunshine? Yeah, it was you. It was you and Rachel Reeves, wasn't it? And this time, we're in a real pickle. We're going to be catching up with top economist Liam Halligan on just that later on in the programme. He's going to shed a bit of a truth light on the situation. Tory leader Kemi Badenoch has also declared that Britain is back under union control. You don't say, Kemi. We noticed how they got massive public sector pay increases, which no doubt has added to our economic woes, and they're still planning to go on strike because there's not enough. Well, guess what? We can't afford it. You're just going to have to, like the rest of us, manage in a cost of living crisis or else grow the economy. Oh, yeah, that old chestnut. And Elon Musk says he fears that Western civilization is under threat. And there have been reports that apparently he's holding private talks on how to get rid of Starmer. Yeah, he's sitting there going, how am I going to do this? But, has he got a point? I've been saying for a long time the whole of the West seems to be frog-marching itself to a cliff edge. I'm glad someone's actually talking about it. We've got to talk about it, don't we? It's existential at this point. We're also going to be talking to someone who has devastatingly lost their house in Los Angeles in the wildfires that are engulfing California. Don't look set to diminish anytime soon. Epic scales of destruction going on over there. Some of the most famous street names in the world engulfed in flames. Shocking. This is Talk. Welcome to the home of common sense. Now, to help me in my quest to bring you common sense and to bring you truth, and I don't know, a bit of sardonicism, a bit of optimism amidst it all, is the one and only Tim Montgomery, former number 10 advisor, founder of Conservative Home and a relatively newly adopted reformist. Good morning, Tim. How are you?
Well, I'm full of cold, actually, Alex. So I wish I'd had a holiday in the sun last week. But nice to see you, and I hope you had a good break.
Yeah, I'm glad I'm looking at you down there rather than over there, because I've got a new rule, which is nobody is allowed to come to me with any sort of snivel. I'm off to America to go and hang out at inauguration next week, and I want to be well. I don't want any of this flu business, this RSV, the new China virus that's going around. No, thank you. You keep it to yourself. Sharing is not caring. Talking about China, well, Rachel Reeves seems to think that's the best place to be right now, rather than deal with the market turmoil here in the UK. In fact, she seems to think that China could well be the solution to help us grow the economy. What do you think to that?
Well, she certainly needs some solutions, doesn't she? She's supposed to be the chancellor that delivered growth. That was the main economic mission. Not the main economic mission. It was supposed to be the main mission of this Labour government. But it's going all very badly wrong, isn't it? And so I think it's a combination of things, but of course the big thing was the massive increase in taxes that she introduced in her own budget. And I've been talking to Labour people in the last sort of day or two, Alex, and they do not now think that Rachel Reeves will survive the end of this year. I think she may have to go much more quickly, but she's been a disastrous chancellor, I'm afraid.
It seems to me that going over to China to say, help us with growth, is just completely non-commonsensical, for want for a better phrase, given that by and large they managed to undercut everything we do in terms of manufacturing because they themselves don't adhere to net zero targets. And we go over there writing them a massive check paid for by taxpayers so we can self-flagellate and straitjacket ourselves at the altar of net zero while they can use coal-fired power stations to make solar panels. And they must be laughing out the side of their mouth because she's just going back for more. She's like, Oliver, please, can you actually take all of our economic growth? Can you take our manufacturing away from us because you do it cheaper? And we don't have a whit about how on earth we could manage to get manufacturing going in this country. It seems to be counterproductive.
Completely. And I think one of the reasons why Donald Trump and most of American industry now takes the view that they do on China is, often they did joint ventures in China, they invested in local economies, and all of their intellectual capital, their ingenuity was stolen by Chinese again and again and again. And we've had the whole issue of Hong Kong. A former Prime Minister, Margaret Thatcher, signed an agreement with China that's been completely ripped up. I could give you plenty of other examples as well, Alex, but you're probably familiar with them. The fact is, we can't trust China. If we do economic deals with them, they'll organise them so that not just to their advantage, but that we're ripped off.
Right.
So I really don't understand the logic at all.
No, this has been China's modus operandi for ages. I remember I started writing a book on it about 20 years ago, believe it or not, when I was living out in Ghana, because I saw the Chinese were even doing that to Ghanaian stuff, like African fabrics, that once upon a time they had about 11... Yeah. They don't. The thing is about the Chinese economy is, by and large, it isn't able to come up with the ideas. But by gum, when they nick them, they're brilliant at production lines because they treat their own people like rubbish. And so going there and saying, oh, well, you can do it far cheaper. We've got all the genius over here, but you can actually make it. This is the root of impoverishing the country. This is what's gone wrong in the first place. I don't get it.
No, I completely. Sorry.
Let's talk about the unions. Badenoch turning around going, Britain is back under the control of the union. She's got a point, doesn't she?
Oh, completely. And one of the first acts, of course, of the Labour government was to give in to the union, the pay demands of train drivers. And now train drivers in Britain are already paid better than anyone else in Europe, I think potentially the world. And yet Labour gave them more money at the same time as they took away the winter fuel allowance from so many pensioners. And of course, what we've seen in the recent days is Labour voting to undo a lot of the education reforms that didn't just come from the Tories, but came from Tony Blair as well. And why are they doing that? As Kemi Badenoch said, it's because the unions have such a stranglehold on Labour. And that stranglehold, linked to what we've just been talking about, is probably only going to get tighter. Because Labour did have a reasonable amount of money from business, donations from business before the election. But because of their economic mismanagement, I think business is turning away from Labour. So Labour will become more dependent on the unions, which won't be good for the country at all.
Yeah, the problem is, if we need the sort of meleification of the economy, if we need to sort of take our own chainsaw to the civil service, to public services, because she's got to choose either between economic growth, which she's unable to stimulate, and going over to China, I don't think is the solution to that. Higher taxation, which we just cannot afford, that's going to throw us into a period of increased stagnation, or some sort of austerity, some sort of cut. And when it comes to trying to do anything, when it comes to making some efficiency savings, that's when the unions close in. That's when they sort of grab the government by the hand and say, you better do as we say, or we're not going to staff the hospitals. We're going to bring the whole country to a grinding halt.
Yeah, and I think we're going to have some very, very difficult public sector pay settlements coming over future years of this Labour government. And so I think we'll have a lot of industrial turmoil to add to all the other problems that we have.
I was thinking when I was getting the tube over here this morning, I did this before on a show where I sort of came up with a fantasy, let's make the melee list. What would we cut and how much money would we save? Because no one ever seems to want to do this. And I started making an itinerary of things that, quite frankly, we can live without and should bin straight away, including, I would say, controversially, just get rid of all the devolution. And yet Labour want to create more devolution, more sort of metro mayors, more sort of glorified county councils, more layers of public administration that cost the taxpayer loads of money when we could be turning Holyrood into residential flats or something and having just one government in Westminster. That would save a bob or two.
It wouldn't. How much would it save? Do you know?
Do you know, I did this calculation the last time I sort of brought this topic up on the show, but I'm going to have to Google in the advert break to find out. But a lot, basically. If you add up the 3 devolved governments and all the sort of metro mayors, police and crime commissioners, what's the point of them? They don't do anything. If we were
They not particularly. Yeah.
I think we've got more politicians per capita than almost anywhere on earth. It's a madness. They cost money. Yeah. They come with their offices. They come with the big pensions. It's absolutely insane.
All new politicians, of course, they have their own ideas. So there's no continuity in policy. No one implements anything. New politicians take office and they want to do something different from other politicians. So I'm afraid the big expense from them is constant churning in public policy.
Well, ironically, it doesn't seem Rachel Reeves has many ideas. Apparently she's going to all of her other staff and this, that and the other going, oh, you know, well, please tell me what to do for economic growth. I don't know what I'm doing. Oh, yeah, I was an economist at the Bank of England. Don't forget that. But I'm not going to come up with any sort of coherent economic strategy. No, everyone else needs to tell me what to do. I want to bring your focus now to Elon Musk and the reports that he's trying to oust Starmer. I mean, this isn't exactly a secret. He sort of said on X, hasn't he? Is there any way to get rid of him?
I picked up he doesn't quite like it. That's certainly true.
I don't think he's a fan somehow. No. But I think, you know, I think for Elon, this is in the context of looking at Britain, which for a lot of the Western world, we're the sort of great-grandma, aren't we? We're sort of the from empire and all the rest of it. When we go wrong, there's a real palpable sense of it all going very wrong. And people have looked at the state of the UK economy, been shocked by the grooming gang scandal, which kind of, it holds a very ugly mirror up to our own society when you think, gosh, you know, it's amazing that we haven't had, you know, mass protests. Of course, we're not allowed to. We end up in clink if we even sort of, you know, mutter concern about these topics.
All right, bandwagon you're on, Alex. No, that's what Keir Starmer says. You should know better.
Well, Keir Starmer's now basically calling Elon Musk far right. He doesn't stop, does he?
I know.
It's insane.
I think Keir Starmer probably thinks of most people as far right, actually.
But what do you think Elon's sort of... why has he got this intrigue about the United Kingdom in particular? What do you reckon is sort of going through his mind as he sort of focused very heavily on making sure the government in the United Kingdom, you know, pulls its socks up and starts working for the people? Why Britain?
Well, look, you know, we often knock our country, and I think our country is in trouble in various ways. But we still sort of are like a soft power superpower. Because of our universities, because of our education system, because of the English language, because of our history and tourism, etc. You know, we have an outsized influence on, I think, how the world thinks. So many people travel through London all the time. It's one of the great international cities. And some of that influence, I think, is for good, but a lot of it, I think, is increasingly for bad, because political correctness that's seeping through much of our domestic life is sort of, I think, and entering that ideas class as well. So Elon Musk, his interest in Britain, I think partly comes because of family history. But as someone who's interested in ideas, I can understand why he would be worried about the influence that Britain has in its various channels.
Yeah, someone's just messaged me, Dean from Dagenham, saying, morning, Alex. It seems to me the biggest threats to the people of the UK are the far left, of which we have many. I mean, this is so true. The amount that the sort of shift in the political spectrum has moved, that actually far leftism is considered centrism, and anything that isn't basically communist is now considered fascistic, and, you know, it's mad.
Yeah, and I think we're seeing a global shift towards the right. We're seeing it in Europe, we've seen it in America, of course. You keep mentioning Argentina. We're the exception at the moment, certainly by whether you look at Keir Starmer having the massive majority that he does. But I wonder actually if we are that exception, if you look at underlying opinion polls. This government, I think, has shown to become more unpopular more quickly than any previous new government. So when we are sort of force-fed leftism, the British people don't like it.
I mean, let's see if we can answer Elon's question, which is there a way to change the government? Because unfortunately, I think when I look at the apparatus of state, there just isn't. They've got a big majority. They would need to essentially either have a vote of no confidence in their own leader. That could happen, perhaps, in the future. But it's not going to actually change the nature and shape of the government we have in power, is it?
No, I think the media plays an important role in holding the government to account. Opinion polls will keep the government hopefully on its toes. But I'm afraid, hold on to your seat, Alex, I think we have got 4 more years of Labour government. And we know how much damage they've done in 6 months. How much they'll do in 4.5 years frightens me. What do? Our task is to be ready for the time in 4 years' time when I think the British people will know the economy and the country is in fundamental trouble, and they'll be ready for medicine in a way that they were at the end of the 1970s, but haven't been ready for medicine of late. It's hard to do difficult things, but I don't think we're far away now from a moment when the public will demand a big change in direction, because they'll know without any question that Britain is in trouble. And will there be a political party ready at that next election to say, a little bit like a doctor treating a serious injury, it's going to be tricky, there's going to be pain, but it will be better if you take this medicine. That's what we now need to prepare, because most of the political parties at the last election just sold soft soap, really, and no real solutions to not just Britain's problems, but the decline, I think, of the West.
Yeah, I think it was a pivotal moment. We sort of hit a fulcrum, I think, at the day that Donald Trump was saved from assassination, an act of God, some might say, that now we actually have, or will have, a president in the United States with far more sensible and assertive ideas than anyone that's really gone before, even Donald Trump 1.0, one could argue. And hopefully this will give political cover, and the apprentice might be able to teach the master once more what it means to live in a true democracy. Thank you ever so much, Tim Montgomery. Thank you as well for tuning in today. I'm going to have a little break now, but don't go anywhere, because I am with you through till 1 o'clock. And if you want to get involved with the conversation, share your thoughts, get patched through to the studio and talk to me. The number to call is 0344499 1000. If you're dialing internationally, remember to put +44, just in case someone listening out there might want to, I don't know, spice up the programme a bit from a different country. If you want to text, it's 8 to 7 at 222. Put talk before your message. That way, it bounces past all the Starlink satellites, makes its way to the mast on top of Talk Towers, and ends up in this sort of micro Cape Canaveral in front of me in the studio. We're on X at talkTV, and I'm back after this.
Sleepy Joe Biden proved to everyone that he has what it takes to be president. So now we have a new victim to defeat, Kamala Harris, L-Y-I-N apostrophe. Take a look at what happened. In Springfield, they're eating the dogs. The people that came in, they're eating the cats. Many people have told me that God spared my life for a reason.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Oh, we got a bit of flurry of excitement here in Talk Towers because somebody has messaged, Alex is brilliant with a thumbs up, and it says Donald J. Trump. And they were like, oh, my God, could it be? And I said, come on, it's going to be someone pulling my leg. And it's a +44 number, so I'm pretty sure it is someone pulling my leg. But it would have been kind of cool if the president-elect was listening. I'm sure he's a busy man. I'm sure he's got better things to do with his time. And I don't blame him because he's got to save the world. Now, talking about saving the world, Elon Musk's concern with Western civilization is essentially, and very predictably, being investigated by the Home Office and the Counter-Extremism Department. That's right, they have got their grey, shadowy figures on the case to analyse his social media presence and the things he's saying online. Very much the métier of the Starmer government. I mean, dear Lord, you better not voice a thought on social media, particularly if it's X, because that's the most dangerous thing on earth, isn't it? Speaking out against the crumbling edifice that was the once great and dominant and most progressive force on planet Earth. That's right. The Western world with its Judeo-Christian values that have propped up civilizations, that have brought to you vaccines and space travel, electricity, the internet, largely a lot of world peace. No, that's not worth preserving. We better not speak in favour of that. In fact, why don't we just let the whole of the Western world march itself like lemmings to the edge of the cliff and whoop, over the edge? Because do you know who are better? Do you know who's really got this right and just haven't had their opportunity to prove to us yet? Oh, because we're evil, of course. We're terrible. We've not allowed anybody else to share in the glow of success on the international stage. No, we're monstrous, oppressive colonists. That's right. Actually, the people who we really need to worry about are those men out there in those cold and windy, drizzly parts of the United Kingdom who all share in a common faith that little white girls are the problem. Yes, they're dreadful. They must be used and abused, picked up like rag dolls, cast asunder after the most abusive, abhorrent, monstrous, degrading, vile, evil acts. Oh, they're the ones that we should be concerned about. Don't say anything bad about them. Do not, at any cost, hold any sort of inquiry into what's gone on there. What would that do anyway? It didn't really happen. Oh, none of this stuff happened. This is just Islamophobia. Actually, that's right. That's what we need to do. We need to conjure up legislation to prevent people talking about it. We need to make it a hate crime to talk about it. That way, the people who recognise that there might be a problem become the problem, because guess what? The government doesn't have any solutions. And so it's far easier, isn't it, than actually conjure up some sort of effective, assertive solution, policies that might actually start to reverse some of the horrific damage and decline that we have seen in the West. No, rather than do that, because there are no solutions unless, well, they're the sort of things that the elite media class and political class find unconscionable. No, instead, anybody who dares say, do you know what, things aren't as good as they used to be, maybe we need to have a look into this. Maybe we need to have a look at changing demography, declining birth rates among the West. Maybe we need to have a look at whether multiculturalism is working or whether it's cultural vandalism. Instead of saying, well, hold on, this climate change thing, maybe it's a concern, but we cannot self-flagellate at the altar of net zero without crippling the economy and essentially the countries, the great brain power that's behind the solutions. Letting the crinkles, the Chinas, the Russias, the Indias, the North Koreas churn out as much CO2 as they want and take the lead isn't going to change anything when it comes to net zero, is it? Because they're not the ones coming up with any solutions. They don't have the brain power to put the world to rights. But instead, the countries that have a precedent in actually changing things, advancing things, improving things, being the vanguards of science, of progress. They're the ones who are essentially being strapped up in a straitjacket and told that they've got it wrong for years. They must not do anything to help growth, manufacturing. No. Instead, let's take all our ideas over to China because they deserve it. It's their time now as well. Basically, it's everybody's time, isn't it? Apart from the Western world. We've had our time. That is the message. So surely, then, Elon Musk is evil to point out that, oh, well, the Western world kind of did good things. And maybe we need to look at how we can protect it and celebrate it and make sure it can go on being the bastions of progress in the world. Because, frankly, without Western civilization, we'd be in pretty dark ages. And yet, Western civilization is attacking itself. It is self-cannibalizing. It is, with the woke mind virus, preventing itself from having sensible conversations, from coming up with practical solutions, from celebrating itself and identifying from history the things that we got right, the things that we could still get right if we allowed ourselves a little bit of manoeuvrability, a bit of flexibility, a little less regulation, a little less tax, a little less constant criticism and censorship. If we allowed ourselves once again to thrive, the whole world would thrive with us. That is the message. That is what I think Elon Musk recognises. And that is why he is looking at Britain, a country that for a long time has had some of the greatest universities. The country, if you look at our innovations and our inventions, the country essentially responsible for so much: the television, the telephone, the internet, computers, vaccines. Little Britain, this funny little cold, windswept island that sits in the middle of Europe, who often wants to strangle itself in regulation and socialism, and the great free America, now the leading force internationally where creativity thrives and innovation prospers. Little Britain should be at the heart of that. We always were in times past. We were the great expeditionists. We went out and created a free world. Yes, we created an empire, and guess what? That empire sometimes did some pretty good things. It wasn't all wicked. And now this little country that brought democracy, that set English as the lingua franca of the globe, that should be so proud and hold itself in esteem, that other countries for years have looked to for our common sense, for our calmness, for our stiff upper lip, for our resolve, for our integrity, for us standing up for what is right in the world in 2 world wars. Little Britain, who has always been a fantastic island, punching far above its weight, setting a precedent for the rest of the world to look upon and go, wow, thank you for being you. We're going wrong. We're going wrong because governments want us to go wrong. They willfully want to cripple us, to reduce us, to attack us. It is self-cannibalizing. It needs to stop. So actually, if you think that those are extreme ideas, then investigate me. Put this online. Send the counter-extremist forces after me for saying there is a lot to be proud of and a lot that we need to continue being proud of. And actually, only when we have optimism and pride and resolve to fight for something because we believe in it can we continue to be the bastion of progress, not just in the Western world, but across the globe. All right, shall we do some messages and calls now? Oh, no, we're going to do a break, apparently. So I am told. Must have ranted on a long time there. But, hey, it's a fight worth fighting. OK, going to take a little break now. I'm going to catch my breath, have a cup of tea. But when I come back, there's so much more news to talk about. We're going to be delving into what Rachel Reeves is hoping to achieve in China and whether it's absolute madness. I think it is. I'm back after this.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Hello, welcome back to the show. Can I just say thank you from Stefan Doncaster, who's thanked me for using the term cast asunder. I didn't even know I'd done that. I like bringing back the sort of good heritage vocabulary. Lots of decent words in the English language that we fail to use and instead sort of go to terms like problematic, which just makes me want to vomit. But talking about problematic, Rachel Reeves is visiting China. Instead of, I don't know, staying at home and figuring out how to save our economy, which is in tatters, she's going over to glad hand President Xi. And she's looking for growth, apparently. Is she going to find it there? Let's speak to Mark Saber, Director at the Committee for Freedom in the Hong Kong Foundation and International Affairs Consultant. Mark, thank you so much for coming into the studio. China, what a great ally indeed. We all need China, don't we? What is Rachel Reeves thinking here? Is this about sort of getting stuff so they can meet net zero targets, or is there an argument to be made that China could be the solution?
So I think it would be childish and churlish to say that we should ignore China. China is obviously a massive player in the world and certainly in the economy. The question is, are they our economic savior? And I would say the answer should be absolutely not. And it's not just based on the economy, it's also based on the fact that they're not a trustworthy partner. They break their deals. They have infiltrated the UK. We have spy scandals constantly coming out from China. We have a spy who's been arrested for infiltrating Prince Andrew's inner circle. We have spies in Parliament. We have a man going on trial in February for spying on behalf of the Hong Kong Economic Trade Office. We have all of these things going on constantly, and yet we're running to China to solve our economic problems, instead of finding methods with allies who are better friends to us. And working better with them. Now, I'm not suggesting at all that we shouldn't trade with China or that we shouldn't have manufacturing in China. I'm suggesting that we should stop treating them as some golden goose who will keep laying these eggs that will save us from all of our woes.
It's not the problem, actually, that China for decades now has played a very smart, gradual game. Their modus operandi has been the sort of incremental economic erosion of the rest of the world by seizing assets, by using the Belt and Road Initiative to control almost 90% plus, I think, of mineral wealth in the world that's now needed for smart technologies. And not only that, they own about a third of the world debt. I think they have more world debt in their pockets than the OECD group of nations, the IMF and the World Bank put together. I mean, they've kind of put themselves in an all-powerful position, and we're sort of going, oh gosh, we've got no choice now.
Well, I think the thing is that, especially since Xi Jinping became chairman of the Chinese Communist Party 10 odd years ago, the power of China has grown exponentially. Now, we made them rich. We gave them all of our money. We sent all of our manufacturing over there, and they are now using all of that for, as you say, economic coercion. They now threaten us economically every time something happens that they don't like. They threaten to switch off the tap. They can cut cables in the North Sea, and all we do is send the ship back with a bit of a don't come back. We should have seized that ship, arrested the captain, and so on and on. And this economic coercion is pervasive across Europe now. Originally, Belt and Road was seen as something that happened in Africa or in Asia. It's not. It's right here on our shores. It's right here in the UK. Chinese businesses and Hong Kong businesses own vast swathes of the British economy, industries, water, nuclear power plants, and so on. And again, I repeat, it's not from a nation that we can trust. They repeatedly break our trust. They broke the Sino-British declaration in Hong Kong. 200,000 Hong Kongers had to flee for taking part in pro-democracy protests, and many of them have settled in the UK. There is a British citizen in jail in Hong Kong called Jimmy Lai. He's been there for 4 years. For me, Rachel Reeves should have said, there is no visit until he's out. It's ridiculous. Why are we not standing up for our own citizens abroad instead of running back to China and hoping that they will help us out?
Should we not? Would not the best approach, instead of flying in that direction, be flying in the opposite direction, going to sit down with Trump's team ahead of inauguration and say we need to come up with a comprehensive Western world strategy to counter China? What resources can we share? What can we pool together? Where can we mine? Where can we access the sort of things we need to make the West the bastions of manufacturing once again, to give us the motor to charge forward rather than constantly having to go to China and say, well, you know, they've got all the resources now, we better let them make it?
I mean, I completely agree. There is clearly a strategy of appeasement going on, and I can't understand why the British, the Germans, the Americans, the Canadians, the Australians can't begin a process of a reduction of reliance. You know, if we're making 100 cars a day, let's make it 90. Let's bring 10 back to the UK. Slowly, reduce that reliance, reduce the money that we're sending over there, bring it back to the UK or to other friendly nations that we can work with and trust on some of the issues and the values that we care about. This constant appeasement, the mega embassy that they want to build in Tower Hamlets in London, the local council has rejected it. Time and time again, residents have rejected it. The security services don't want it. Why on earth has Keir Starmer said, I'm going to look at this myself? Absolutely not should there be a mega embassy right in the centre of London.
Is there a real threat that Rachel Reeves, because this isn't, you know, she's talking about growth of the economy and trade. This isn't the Trade Secretary. This is the Chancellor going over. And you kind of think, well, that's not really your mandate. That's not your job. But one could argue, you know, that is the second most senior person in government. Do you think that there's a real risk that she's going to go over to China and make deals that will put us in a Gordian knot of Chinese control for perpetuity?
Well, first of all, she's not going by herself. She's going with a delegation of banks, investment firms, and so on, including people from HSBC, including the head of the Bank of England and so on. And they're clearly there to work out all of these financial deals. They're clearly there because they believe that they can get something out of it, and she's just there leading that delegation. But again, my point is, it's not that there shouldn't be trade deals or investment with China. It's that it should be a little bit on our terms. We always seem to be the ones going, oh, you know, we don't want to upset anyone and we don't want to offend them and so on. Why not? You know, release the British citizen from prison, then yes, let's talk trade. Stop putting bounties on people in the United Kingdom, and yes, let's talk trade. You know, we deny the Taiwanese president a visit to the United Kingdom, but we keep visiting China. It doesn't make sense. Why aren't we investing more of that money in Taiwan? for example. So Rachel Reeves has a job to try and prop up the economy, which is clearly not in a good state. But I think she's sorely misguided if she thinks that China is going to be our saviour.
Surely this visit also flies in the face of American policy. They are our closest ally. We still have a special relationship. They're still the biggest, most powerful nation on earth. If anyone's going to be able to help solve the China question, it is them. And it seems to me it's something that Donald Trump is hell-bent on doing. And so you wonder why we don't have a more Atlanticist policy.
I mean, I totally agree. I think the rise of authoritarians, the rise of dictatorships, the rise of these countries who are now banding together, Russia, China, Venezuela, Iran, Belarus, Saudi Arabia, they're clubbing together. That little club called BRICS is now becoming a real threat to Western liberal democracies. And I think that instead of thinking that we are in the position where we were 50 years ago or 100 years ago, where they need us, they are quite clearly taking a position that they want to bypass the US, bypass Europe, bypass the United Kingdom. They want to trade amongst themselves using renminbi. They don't want to use dollars or pounds or euros.
Exactly.
And that's a real threat to the West. And I would agree entirely that the Western liberal democracies need to have a cohesive strategy where they stand together and band against these constant attacks on our own values and our own economies.
Why do we seem to have such a problem as well? I mean, I want to use a good example here. So during COVID, I was working with a consortium, an Anglo-American consortium, who are very keen on promoting small modular reactors, pop-up nuclear technology, which would really help us sort of, fight net zero if that's your jam, but reduce reliance on fossil fuels, which frankly now we do have to go to some pretty dodgy regimes cap in hand to ask for their help. But also this is a technology that China would desperately love to have. They want that so much. We have it. We've got the big beast of Rolls-Royce saying we can build this, and yet our own government won't sign an MOU and say, great, we're going to be at the forefront of this. It's like we're waiting for someone else to take the technology from us, take the intellectual property and do it.
Yeah, I mean, I agree, but that's partly, there's a mentality that we have of always getting the best price, the cheapest price. And so the risk of doing that is that you're going to always go to countries where you don't have workers' rights, human rights, insurance, fixed salaries. So, of course, China can undercut any country in the world. Of course, Saudi Arabia can undercut anybody because, they can pay and charge whatever they want. China can not pay its workers. We had a hearing in Parliament yesterday with the clothing company Shein, where they asked her a very simple question. Do you have cotton from the region of Xinjiang where we have a commitment not to buy cotton from because of slave labour? And she said, I can't answer that.
Of course they do.
Of course they do. And so electric vehicles, solar panels, all these things that we're worried about, of course they can make an electric vehicle for £15,000. They don't have to pay their workers. And if somebody dies on the job, there's no compensation. So I think that we should be trying to bring some of that back and giving those contracts to companies in the UK, even if it costs a little bit more. And maybe the British public could come along on that journey, understanding that, yes, prices may be a little bit higher, but there are bigger factors at play than just the basic price. It means more jobs, it means national security, it means safety for our citizens, it means a little bit of national pride as well, a little bit of we produce this back here in the UK instead of everything being made in a land far, far away where we make them rich and then we have to suffer the consequences when they turn on us.
How healthy is China, though? Because there was a sort of big discussion at one point of there being a big real estate bubble that could blow up at any particular moment. Is China... I think their debt-to-GDP ratio is far higher than ours, and we're sort of stressing, oh, my gosh, it's in tatters, we're going to have to bring back austerity. But China seems to constantly be teetering on the brink of an economic collapse that could, frankly, collapse global markets.
Well, first of all, China's economy is not as good as it says it is. We know that because several Chinese economists have come to the West and said the numbers are fudged or the numbers aren't real. In fact, one of them made a speech about that just a few weeks ago, and he's now disappeared because he said actually the growth is only about 2%, not 5%, which is what we're being sold. But there's another factor. Who knows what the real figures are? Under the CCP, they can make up whatever numbers they want to show how strong they are. We don't know. There isn't a free press. So you can't have anyone questioning the secretaries. You can't have anyone digging into the results as you can in a Western liberal democracy like the United Kingdom or Germany or France. And so who actually knows the real data? So if Rachel Reeves goes there thinking, oh, my God, they've got 5% growth, they're doing so well. Well, do they?
Do they?
How do we know?
Exactly. Mark, thank you ever so much. By the way, brilliant glasses. I care for those greatly. Going to get myself yourself a pair. Right, taking a short break now, but kind of continuing on this subject, we're going to be discussing net zero madness after this, after the Bank of England has actually admitted that net zero is driving up energy prices. Who'd have thunk it? We're discussing that after this.
One of Keir Starmer's, speaking to sort of Downing Street people before Christmas, and they reckon the Prime Minister genuinely thinks there's a 1 in 3 chance, 3 to 1 chance, so 25% chance that Nigel Farage is going to be the next Prime Minister. And you just think, if that's what
so the Prime Minister thinks that.
I mean, it's pretty. Yeah, they think he's going to be up against. He thinks he's going to be up against a right-wing populist force.
Yeah.
He just doesn't know who it's going to be yet. Either it's going to be Reform, and they keep their act together. They've been pretty good.
Sleepy Joe Biden proved to everyone that he has what it takes to be president. So now we have a new victim to defeat, Kamala Harris, L-Y-I-N apostrophe. Take a look at what happened. In Springfield, they're eating the dogs, the people that came in. They're eating the cats. Many people have told me that God spared my life for a reason.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Hello, welcome back. David in the Cotswolds has just said a great show and great soliloquy. Well done for using the word soliloquy. I do enjoy that. As an English graduate, you see, English and philosophy. I think we should just revive some good vocabulary in this country. I'm so fed up with young people communicating with, like, emojis and stuff. What about words? Our language is the most important language on planet Earth. Let's revive decent vocabulary. Right, Net Zero Madness. Andrew Montford joins us now, Director of Net Zero Watch. Bank of England's actually admitted net zero is driving up energy prices, as if we didn't know that. But do you think anyone's going to have a reality check? Because at the same time, all I keep hearing today is, well, it's the hottest 10 years on record, all that 1.5% that, whatever it is, degrees that we're not supposed to go above. We've now gone above it. It's cataclysmic. The world's going to catch on fire, and look what's happening in Los Angeles. I mean, the Bank of England turning around and saying, well, it's going to cost us money is not going to change the government's direction on this, is it?
No, I think our government is probably rather set in their ways. Mr. Miliband is not for turning. Whether the rest of his party feels the same way is another question altogether. I think there are people within the Labour Party now who are quite worried about Mr. Miliband's direction of travel, and I think he will come under increasing pressure to change. But yeah, there's no doubt that renewables are driving up energy prices. I mean, the carbon tax, which the Bank of England was talking about, costs the country, well, this year maybe £3 or £4 billion. So that's £100 per household. And then you add on all the other things that net zero puts onto your bills. So there's 10 billion or so of subsidies to renewables. There's all the costs of balancing the grid, which has soared. That's another couple of £1 billion. There's the fact that all our gas-fired fleet is really inefficient and old because nobody wants to build new gas-fired power stations because of all the renewables. That's costing billions of pounds more. It's hundreds of pounds for every single household in the country every year. Maybe as much. I would suggest it's probably getting on towards £1,000 a year per household at the moment. So yes, it's driving costs up, and the costs keep going up every time we look at the price cap, don't they? Miliband's been in control since July. And every time we've had a price cap revision since then, the cap's gone up. And it's going to keep going up. Now, whether the Labour Party can weather many more of these increases is another question altogether. I think next time we get some elections, some local elections or some by-elections, I think Labour could be in big trouble because people can't take the pain any longer.
Well, yeah, I mean, I think they know they're going to be in big trouble, which is why they want to cancel the May elections, it seems. Let's talk about the sort of nitty-gritty of this, because look, people are watching television today, seeing what's going on in Los Angeles. There's a huge debate raging online about whether this is a lack of policy making, and decent decisions, in fact, negligent decisions over in California, or those going, well, this is proof of the pudding, the world is on fire, literally. But when you look at legacy media, we're constantly told that this is all a settled science, climate change, and if we don't reduce carbon emissions, this is going to become commonplace, and frankly, the world is in trouble. So first of all, where are you on the sort of settled science argument? And this is a big comprehensive question. And secondly, can you contextualise where we're at when it comes to our emissions and global emissions?
Okay, so in terms of the settled science, no, it isn't settled at all. I mean, there's huge debate over almost every aspect of the climate system. The one thing that there probably is a degree of agreement on is that we really haven't seen very much by way in changes of extreme weather. This is the official position of the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change, which publishes the reports on the state of the world's climate. They list all the major meteorological phenomena, and they tell you which ones they can detect a significant change in. And this is essentially almost nothing. It is essentially the global temperature, which is not extreme weather, if you like. It's just the temperature, and that's about it. There's almost nothing else. So the weather extremes aren't getting worse, and the idea that the fires in California are something to do with climate change is just a complete joke. I mean, it's ridiculous. Almost, fires are caused by, either by lightning strikes or arsonists. Most of these big fires in America and Australia that we've seen in recent years have been caused by arsonists. So, it's nothing to do with the climate, but it does make for good, scary television. And so, if you like, the ambulance chasing activists will use it to their benefit. But, we, if you like, in new media can see through that, and we know what they're up to.
And in terms of our emissions then, because of course, we've got the Paris Accord and this, that and the other, this government and the previous government, Boris Johnson especially, signed us up to extremely punitive net zero targets that would be breaking international law if we didn't stick to them or some rubbish like that. But where are we when it comes to contributions to global emissions compared to countries like China, who seem to be chugging out whatever they want?
Yeah, so, I mean, we are 1% of global emissions, so we are essentially an irrelevance. And as you correctly note, China and India as well are growing their emissions extremely quickly. So us as a percentage of global emissions is falling. We are essentially irrelevant, and nobody is following our lead. I mean, we've had 10 years or more of politicians saying we are going to show the rest of the world the way, and the rest of the world is looking at us and going, you must be mad. You've wrecked your economy. Why on earth would we want to follow you? So, global emissions will keep on going. As I say, we look around the climate, it doesn't seem to be getting any worse. And it's quite clear that the cost of trying to cut emissions is far worse than any cost of climate change. So, the rest of the world is quite rationally looking at the situation and saying, I think we'll just carry on the way we're going. We, on the other hand, are being completely irrational, and we are ploughing on with this utter madness.
Super briefly, because I've got to go to break very soon, it's about 30 seconds. Are we facing potentials of blackouts?
Yes, absolutely. It is really very tight, and there are plenty of power stations that may well come off the grid in the coming 2 or 3 years, and there's almost nothing to replace them. So, yeah, we could expect blackouts, I would say, in the next 2 years. That's me going out on a limb, as I don't think I've ever done so before, but it is now getting very worrying.
Well, here you go. Maybe candle manufacturing in the UK may have a revival. Andrew Montford, thank you ever so much, Director of Net Zero Watch, giving us a little bit of truth, shining the light of honesty onto a debate that's raging as hot as the Californian wildfires. Going to take a short break now, but don't go anywhere, because I am back for 2 more hours of common sense and communal catharsis. Go make a cup of tea, and I'll see you in just a moment.
across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Hello, welcome back to the programme. Alex Phillips here with you through till 1 o'clock in lovely little Blighty. A Blighty we should be proud of. Right, before we go and speak to Mike Buckley, who's a former Labour Party advisor, and grill him on whether he thinks Rachel Reeves is doing the right thing by heading over to Beijing, shall we have a little hark at a voice note now from Sean?
The fact that we have anti-terror police checking out Elon's tweets just shows how pathetic we are. You know, we are the nation whose great-grandparents stormed the beaches of Europe when they either colluded or surrendered, all of them. And now look at us. What a bunch of pathetic wet wipes we are as a country. The left is just soggy.
Also, what is the point anyway? What are they going to do? So counter-extremism are going to look at something that's just readily available online and go, oh, but we don't like that opinion, that's extremist. What are they going to do? Fly over to America and try and arrest the richest, most powerful man on earth? What's the plan here, folks? You're just wasting your time. You're wasting your time. You're wasting my money. You're wasting our confidence in you to do a job actually tackling extremists who are the people out there grooming little girls. The people coming over on boats with connections to terror cells. Not Elon Musk voicing an opinion or two from America. What are you doing? You look like a moron. You make us as a nation. You know, the rest of the world is looking at Britain going, they've lost it, haven't they? They've gone a bit balmy up top, putting people in prison for social media posts. And so how do you respond? You get counter-extremism to investigate Elon Musk. Do you honestly think the rest of the world's going to look at us and go, yeah, Britain, that's bang on. We're going to invest in you now. That's the sort of leadership we want. No, we look like a basket case at this point. Can you stop embarrassing us, please? And we are soggy. I liked that turn of phrase, Sean, soggy. Right, now, let's talk to a man who may not agree with what I just said, but let's have a good old open discussion about the lot of everything. Mike Buckley, former Labour Party advisor. Mike, it's fantastic to have you on the programme. Let's start off talking about Rachel Reeves. People are accusing her of being missing in action. We know that the economy right now is, well, not looking too good, is it? And yet she is off to Beijing with a cohort of banks to go in glad hand. Is that the right approach geopolitically, economically?
Yes, of course it is. I mean, Rachel Reeves is simply doing her job, but it's entirely right that she spends time with foreign governments talking about the UK economy, bringing investments into the country and finding ways that we can collaborate with China in ways that are appropriate for the benefit of our economy and their economy as well. It would be terrible if every time there was something in the news, every time there was a change in statistics or the value of the pound or borrowing costs, the government went into panic mode and decided they had to drop everything and stay here and do what? I mean, what would you expect that she's going to do that can't be done by Darren Jones or Chagos Islands or, you know, people you can see on the screen now, other people who are working in the Treasury, the Prime Minister himself. What we don't want is a government that looks like it presses the panic button after every news story. That wouldn't do the economy good, and it would not be sending a good message to the markets. The government is sending the right message to the markets right now, which is that we're in control, we've got a plan for the economy, we're doing what's necessary to get the economy back on track. After 14 years in this
commentators are sort of saying that actually the impacts of the last budget haven't yet really been felt. Yes, they talk about global pressures creating some of the instability we're seeing right now. You might not want to mention Tulip Siddiq right now. She's not really shining a good light on herself, is she? Some of her funny connections being investigated. But at the end of the day, China is a nation that actively spies on us, is doing so at record levels, that at the very least is behaving mischievously, cutting power cables in oceans, trying to disrupt things. This is really a country that we can trust, and we need to go over there and say, oh, please work with us, when actually they have shown time and again that they're bad faith actors. Surely this is dangerous.
I don't think it is a country that we can trust, quite honestly, and I think that's evident based on the fact that you've just referred to, and also based on the fact that they are actively supporting Russia's war in Ukraine. So clearly China is not a country that we can trust, but it is also not a country that we can ignore on things like the climate crisis that you were talking about before the break, but also when it comes to trade as well. We are still a country that trades with China in many ways, and we will continue to trade with China, I'm sure. That, of course, needs to be done sensibly, and it needs to be done within certain boundaries, and there are obviously things that we would not want to be trading with China and things that we would rightly be cautious of. But they're a huge economy. We can't ignore them. And I think it's right that Rachel Reeves is there to discuss what can be done that would help the UK economy and help us, for example, in terms of security, human rights, etc. as well, while of course being aware of the wider context.
They're not going to listen, though. You just said we can't ignore them. It seems to me they've got the whip hand. The idea that Rachel Reeves is going to come back with some sort of astonishing deal that puts China in a corner and somehow helps grow the UK economy, I think it's for the birds. Let's talk about what Kemi Badenoch has said, which is Britain is now essentially operating at the behest of unions. I mean, there have been a very generous public sector payoffs. I'm sure that you would say this was needed. There have been a long time stagnation in wages, the public sector, in a cost of living crisis, and we couldn't have everything grind to a halt with strikes. But it seems to me that, you know, we've given the unions an inch and they want to take a mile.
Well, I mean, thanks for justifying the public sector pay rises so eloquently. I appreciate that. Saves me the job. I don't think that unions are in control of the Labour Party at all. And understandably, of course, the Labour Party has close links with the trade unions and will listen to what they're saying. And there's a lot of wisdom to be gained from the trade unions with the comments that they make, particularly about public services, because they represent so many people there, but also about the private sector as well. So taking their advice, their recommendations, I think is important if we want the economy to run well, if we want public services to run well. The comments, and I read the comments that Kemi Badenoch had made about the changes that are coming into the school system, they seem completely wrong-headed as far as I'm concerned. The government's put its views forward. Some of the education unions have agreed with them, but there's no sense in which the unions wrote these recommendations and they're being implemented by the Labour Party. Labour's doing what it wants to do, and the union has said, we think this is a good way forward. We know there are real problems in our education system. Some of them have been long-standing, some of them created by the last governments, and it's right that Labour is now taking action to improve education for all young people and children in this country.
Well, I think the proof of the pudding will be in the eating. I think lots of people at mid-level private schools might not agree. Let's talk about Elon Musk now, because I was sitting in a volcanic lair in Lanzarote for the past week, planning to mind my own business, but it all kicked off on X, didn't it? Blimey, it was fun and intriguing to watch, I might point out. But how much of a problem is this for Sir Keir Starmer? Because there are sort of reports now that he'd like to get rid of Sir Keir Starmer before the next general election. He believes that Western civilization is threatened. There's been a lot of pushback. I think the Labour government's policy seems to either be to answer journalist questions by attacking him or else trying to ignore him. But you sort of said that China can't be ignored. Elon Musk is essentially the richest man in the world, and one would argue perhaps one of the most powerful men in the world.
I don't know how powerful he is as compared to how powerful he believes he is, if you see what I mean. And he doesn't have any power in and of himself. I mean, he runs some very big organisations, obviously X being one, which obviously does have some influence in some quarters. He's probably most influential in the world because of his close relationship with Donald Trump, for as long as that lasts, and who knows, we'll see how long that lasts. But I think for him to say that Keir Starmer's leadership is a threat to Western civilization will sound ludicrous to probably everybody listening to your show.
I don't think it would sound ludicrous to people listening. My concern is he's not alone in saying this. You know, you've got people like Milei in Argentina saying this. You've got, I mean, a lot of people in the rest of the world are looking at Britain thinking we're a mess.
Why do you, I mean, whatever your view of whether you think Keir Starmer's doing a good job as Prime Minister or not, to suggest that he's a threat to Western civilization, to me, just seems like overreach, if I'm honest. I mean, you might think he'd be doing a better job as Prime Minister. You might think he's doing a brilliant job. However bad a job you think he's doing as Prime Minister, or good, in what way is he a threat to Western civilization, which, let's face it, spans the US, Canada, Australia, Europe, you know, large parts of the world, all of whom will be entirely unaffected by how good or bad a job Keir Starmer does.
Well, this is the problem, isn't it? Britain was a plucky little international player at one stage, and now a lot of people seem to think we're a basket case. I mean, where in the international community is there a cheerleader for Sir Keir Starmer? He's hardly going out and selling UK PLC on the world stage, is he? Especially at a time where we need economic growth.
Well, I will disagree with you there. I mean, I've been in two international environments recently. So I was at the COP climate conference in November and then spent a week in Brussels in December for various different work reasons. And in both contexts, there was a lot of interest in the Labour Party, a lot of interest in Keir Starmer personally, a lot of optimism at the fact that we'd had a change of government and now had a stable government for the first time in a long time. And at the COP conference, people were very grateful that Keir Starmer turned up and made a significant commitment on climate and emissions. And in Brussels, people were very appreciative of the fact that Keir spent a lot of time in Europe talking to European leaders and in Brussels itself. and making the case that we need a reset of the relationship. So in both contexts, I spoke to a lot of people who had a very optimistic view of the UK and what's happening here under Keir's leadership.
I tell you who is really grateful about those net zero targets and approach to emissions, and that's China. They're very grateful that Sir Keir Starmer's gone down that road, I am certain. Let's talk about Andy Burnham, because he has broken ranks, essentially, and said there should be a national inquiry into grooming gangs. Now, I don't understand why the Labour Party is so lily-livered about this. This, without doubt, is one of the most revolting, horrifying scandals that we've ever seen in UK history, quite frankly. Surely we really do need to grab the nettle and find out what's gone on here.
I mean, I agree with you entirely. It's been a horrific scandal going on for far too long, and it is genuinely awful that the reviews that we've had and the recommendations that were made under Baroness J, probably most importantly, which was a 7-year inquiry costing £200 million. I mean, this was not a half job; it was a full job. It's horrific that the last government refused to implement many of the recommendations in that report, and I hope and expect that this current government will implement those recommendations as soon as possible. Whether there is a case for another inquiry, I'm afraid I don't feel qualified to make that judgment. I haven't read Baroness J's report. I don't know whether it investigated everything. Based on what Andy Burnham said, and he was, I think, referring specifically to the work that he authorised or on what had gone on in Oldham. I think what he was saying is that in that context, he thinks there's more work that needs to be done and more people that need to be spoken to. And if that's the case, that may be applicable nationally, but I'm afraid I just don't have the detail to know that. If that is the case, I hope that it happens. But in the meantime, what I really want to see is all the recommendations from Baroness J's report fully implemented as soon as possible.
A very diplomatic answer. Well done you. Thank you ever so much, Mike Buckley, former Labour Party advisor. Shall we get some of you on the blower now? Let's chat to Linda, who's in Lincolnshire. Hi, Linda.
Good morning. Fabulous programme this morning, Alex. I've been cheering you on.
Oh, thank you. I must have, pepped myself up after my week-long break. A bit of sunshine is good for the soul.
Oh, it's lovely here.
Oh, good.
When I think of China, it reminds me of the Star Trek characters, the Borg.
Right.
They go into a community, they absorb what they want out of it, modify it to how they want it to be, and move on.
Right. Sort of a parasitic approach, essentially.
Yeah. They just take over each, take what they want from it, take the minerals that they want from that planet and destroy the planet and move on.
Oh, do you know, I wasn't expecting a sort of Star Trek reference. It's not a subject matter that I'm very familiar with, I must admit. I've never been a Trekkie myself. But, we had successive people there, especially Mike Buckley, saying we need to engage with China because the jig is up, basically. They own most of the world minerals at this point. There's not much we can do to reverse that. They own a load of world debt. They've snatched a load of intellectual property. They are, whether we like it or not, the big sort of powerhouse, the big factory of the world, churning out stuff for far cheaper than anyone else. And when your own economy is in a mess and you've got to buy things to even adhere to your own targets and policies, we have no choice but to go to China. Do you think that we should have an approach to China that basically goes a bit like this? Regardless of potentially the economic impact, we should start phasing them out.
Well, absolutely. I'm old enough to remember I'm back in Britain, which was when the economy was in a bit of a doldrums back in the 60s. We were encouraged to prefer to buy British, which might not be as cheap. But that kept our industry going and the ancillary industry going and the shops going. And we built back up again, and now we've sunk in even lower. We need education, we need industry, we need people doing things in this country.
We do. Well, I just think we've got some of the greatest houses of learning internationally. And I think we could afford... We're going to be in a situation very soon where we've got to decide, as we often are in this situation, whether we look to the east, to our east, whether that's the continent of Europe or further afield, or whether we look to the west when it comes to how we cooperate on the international stage and the direction of travel we take when it comes to foreign and economic policy. I would feel much more secure if we turn to Trump and said, you seem to have the right ideas. Let's work together on this. Unfortunately, we seem to be going in completely the opposite direction. Linda in Lincolnshire, thank you ever so much. Now, if you want to be like Linda and speak to me at some point over the next hour and 45 minutes, you can register your interest now. You can give my team a call and say you want to be patched through to the studio at some point, and we give you a call back. It's better than your GP surgery. 03444991000 is the number to dial. It's the same as your normal network rate, so as the same amount of money as calling Mrs. Miggins. Haven't mentioned her for a while, have I? And she wants to hear from you as well. You can use that number to send me a WhatsApp or leave me a voice note on WhatsApp if you'd rather be a bit old school and send me a text message. It's 87222. Remember to put the word talk before your text. That way it wins its way into the studios here and doesn't end up somewhere else where it's not going to be cherished and adored as I will. We are on X at talkTV, and I am back just after this.
Same time, you got Rachel Reeves' budget almost like a boiled frog. It wasn't the immediate sort of market scepticism about it, but it's taken a couple of months, but it's really ticking up. Borrowing costs are going up. She's due in China this week, so Chris Phillips on the show today has come out and said she shouldn't be leaving the country. Last time a chancellor left the country when borrowing rates were this high, it was Kwasi Kwarteng, and he flew home and he was in the car from Heathrow Airport back to Westminster when he read on Twitter that he'd been fired.
What's your reaction to that, and indeed the political coverage of
the reality is that the Labour government's blunder budget has collapsed confidence. Sterling is falling, investment is falling, jobs are falling. The only thing that's going up, as I've just said in the House of Commons before I came here, is inflation's going up and the cost of debt is soaring. And that means that the cost of mortgages very quickly will be soaring. And if we're not very careful, if the government doesn't change course and cut...
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Hello there, welcome back to the show. Shall we hit up the phone lines? It's a bit busy this morning. It's like working for Direct Line or something. I feel like I need one of those little headsets. Hello. Let's speak to Chris, who's in London. Hi, Chris.
Morning, Alex.
Hello, good morning.
I sent you a message earlier. I've cancelled all the jobs I was going to do this morning so I could sit and enjoy your show.
Oh. You've got to be growing the economy, Chris. What are you doing, wasting your time listening to me multitask like a woman? I'm joking.
I'm a little bit older than you, darling. I'm semi-retired. Yeah, but there's so much going on in my mind and what you've been going through this morning. The first thing is one thing you haven't mentioned. I did predict that Starmer wouldn't vote on his own three-line whip to protect his legacy. So that because once all of this terrible, awful blotch on our character of the UK with these grooming gang, rape gangs as they are, once he's out of living memory, there'll only be the records of Hansard's and the digital recollections. There'll be nobody there to say what Starmer did. And all the official documents will now say he didn't vote on it. And I guess he'd do that. But just listen to this. The whole of his main front bench didn't vote on it either.
Oh, God, they are so slippery and two-faced and lily-livered and weak-willed. They know. There's a guy online who keeps saying, I've got the receipts. I'm going to show you what the level of collusion was in the cover-up. You will not believe it. Now, I don't know if he's right or if he's not, but I'm like, bring it on, because this has been one of the most... There's actually, I was talking earlier about the need to enjoy the fullness of English vocabulary, and I am struggling to find an adjective to describe the horrors, the atrocity, frankly, of the grooming gang scandal. It's just, I just can't. There's just no, it's pure evil. It is evil. And any government that goes, oh, wow, we've done a little bit of research here, they're still not realising the enormity of what's happened, the dysfunctionality of our public services, the corrosion of our communities, it's not just about, well, who said what and when and who did their job. People should have gone to prison for failing to do their job, for gross negligence, frankly. If you're taking home a salary and your job is being on the front line trying to prevent these sorts of things happening, and you have not done that, you should suffer the consequences. And also, it's not good enough to just go, oh, well, this person here. No, we need to talk, don't we, about what the common denominators were, the factors that led this to even be able to happen in the first place. Why did we have such a fecund environment that enabled and essentially condoned men to go out and commit the worst possible crimes?
Exactly, Alex. The next thing I want to talk about is Rachel from accounts.
Oh, yeah.
Right. So she's gone to China with a bunch of bankers, but no press. No press.
I know.
Now listen, this absolutely stinks because we know that Starmer wants to get his deal with Chagos Islands through before Trump gets in. I'd like to know where Felipe Sands is, the KC that represents Mauritius, that was the founder of Matrix Chambers and Starmer's old boss when Starmer was a barrister. Because I'm wondering if that deal's going to get pushed through before the 20th.
Oh, they'll try to do everything they can, but it is disgusting, the lack of transparency. There is always a lack of transparency with China. I always think, how far does China have to go until the Western world goes, oh, these are bad faith actors? They covered up the whole COVID thing to such an extent that it does make you question what was going on, how this was released in the world and how this seems to have benefited China. I mean, I don't know, what more do they have to do for us to go, do you know what? We really need to take a completely radical change of policy when it comes to how we deal with China. I just don't know. I don't know, Chris. Thank you so much for your call, my darling. Let's speak now to Stephen, who's in Dordogne in France. Oh, you lucky thing, Stephen. How is it over there?
Good afternoon, Alex. Actually, we're heading for colder weather than you've got next week.
Yeah, but you've got better wine, so it's okay.
Oh, yeah, at the moment. But so we've got a cold snap coming, so we'll appreciate what you're going through.
Oh, yeah.
Anyway, on the subject to the financial woes that continue, most of us who are of a certain age could see this coming years ago. You can't keep spending and spending without consequences. And now we're in this debt doom loop. And I don't necessarily blame Rachel from accounts. She just wasn't up to the job, and she's just exacerbated the decline. But what we're going to get, I reckon, is a currency crisis this year. We're already talking about the IMF from the 1970s, and that will mean Keir Starmer will have to resign. And I think that's where we're heading. But that's not going to fix anything.
No, it's going to make things even harder, I guess, where people won't be too disappointed to see the back of him. Look, I agree with what you say in terms of I'm sympathetic to the sort of managed decline that has affected much of Europe, including the United Kingdom, for so long. Brexit, in many respects, was in response to some of these long-term issues and rubbish policy making. But we still have failed to really grasp what we need to do to move forward. And it's almost sort of like now there's a lack of resolve. It's almost like, well, it's inevitable. We've messed it up for so long. We're now in China's lap. We've got no manufacturing. We've got no resources. Oh, dear, the world's on fire. We better concentrate on climate change instead. But one thing that I find really fishy is the fact that Chris in London was saying this just then, the fact that Rachel Reeves is going over, she's the Chancellor, she's going over with all the banks. Who runs the world? Who's actually running the show right now? I mean, it's clear to me there's been a whole hoo-ha about, Liz Truss's budget, and she's turned around and said, no, you need to really look under the bonnet at what went on there. I had the solutions. I was demonised, and there were far higher, far more powerful figures operating who didn't like my direction of travel because the banks and the pension funds have been getting it wrong. They've been taking shortcuts ever since the global financial crisis. We learnt that they're not to be trusted, and yet they are the most powerful people, and they're the ones, frankly, going over to do discussions with Xi Jinping. Rachel Reeves is just along for the blimmin' ride.
I think you're right, Alex. Your previous caller mentioned about the bankers going with Rachel Reeves.
Yeah.
What's being done that she is going to say to China, China's offloaded 60 billion US treasuries over the last year. She's asking, can you offload some of those treasuries and buy some sterling to bolster sterling's value? Because the government needs to sell debt. That's what it's all about. The bankers will get their cut, their 1%, whatever they get on the deal. So it's all for the bankers, not for us.
Yep, I totally agree, Stephen. Thank you ever so much. And, you know, when Rachel Reeves goes over to China, it's like, wow, this is sensible. You've got to engage with China. You go and try and do a deal with Trump. This is a nightmare. He's a monster. He's a threat to democracy. Get real. We're going to take a short break now. And talking about getting real, Sir Keir Starmer has said that his record migrant deportations are a far better deterrent than Rwanda. How's he done it? Is he doing it? What is the truth behind the spin? We're discussing that after this.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Hello, welcome back. Now, apparently, Sir Keir Starmer has claimed that returning migrants to their home countries is a better deterrent than the Rwanda scheme, as he boasted of the highest number of deportations in 7 years. Wow. That should make us happy, shouldn't it? Well, the Home Office published ad hoc statistics showing that 16,400 failed asylum seekers, illegal migrants and foreign criminals had been returned to their home countries in the first 6 months of the Labour government. The department said it was the highest number of returns in a 6-month period since 2017, when 17,378 were returned. Let's speak now to Harjap Singh Bangal, who's a UK immigration lawyer. Harjap, are these statistics, wow, this is brilliant, or is this sort of a small uptick on where we were bumping along anyway?
Well, no, it's something that Labour have got form for. So during the last Labour government, they did have high numbers of removals, up to about 60,000 a year. That waned under the Conservative government, almost to some years 4,000 to 6,000. I think he's got the removals under control. That's despite, people saying, oh, but the ECHR and the human rights. Well, human rights is still in place now, and he's managing to send 16,000 people back in 6 months. The real question is why in the last 14 years the Conservatives hadn't managed to do that. And the real sort of sticking point, his main problem is to stop people coming in. That problem is still there on the small boats.
Right. Well, in defence of the Conservative Party,
you're still going to get political sort of unrest, really.
Under the Conservative Party, they topped that figure. It might have been in 2017, but they did in that particular year return more people in a 6-month period. My big question is how many have been granted the right to remain? I know that one thing that Sir Keir Starmer said is this is all about speeding up processing. We're getting one half of the story here, aren't we? We're getting one half of the story, which is 16,400 have been sent home. I don't know how long a lot of those people have been lingering in the UK waiting for a decision. But I want to see the other side of this equation. How many people have just been signed off with the right to stay?
Well, that will depend on how many are coming in from war-torn countries and countries we haven't got return agreements with, because after Brexit, they forgot to sign any return agreements in that oven-ready deal, which is a big sort of a mistake that was made. Therefore, there'll be more return agreements being signed this year, and removals will be sped up. Of the people that you cannot return, you won't be able to return regardless, and those numbers will roughly stay the same as last year or the year before. However, what the issue was a surplus of people who should have been sent back but weren't being sent back. Now that's a problem. If you've got 30,000 people coming in a year and you're sending 30 back, that's not as bad as 30 coming in and only sending 4 or 5 back. So the removals, I would say, are under control, but it's the small boats that they really need to stop. That is going to be a problem. If those numbers increase next year, then we'll see some pressure on Keir Starmer, especially with this whole smash the gangs thing. And it's true if, not fighting anyone's corner, but the fact is that there are more gangs that have been caught. Recently, I read last week about another gang that have been caught, but the sentences are just not long enough. I mean, 5 years, 6 years, these people are out in 2, 3 years. It's not a big as deterrent. The deterrent has to come in the form of people thinking of, well, you know what, if we try and play the system, we'll be sent back. That's the first deterrent straight away, which is now sort of kicking in. The Rwanda really wasn't a deterrent at all. It was more of a gimmick. And the deterrent must be, well, you know what, it's going to be hard. We're not going to be able to get in. And the gangs must feel, look, if we get caught, then we're going to spend the rest of our life inside. That's got when that accumulates or that all gets together, then we'll have a deterrent. But the small boats is a problem. Removals are up much better than the last government, and foreign offenders, the removal of foreign offenders, people who have committed crimes, up by about 20-odd%, which beggars belief once again, because Keir Starmer is a barrister, but in fact was Suella Braverman. They both know the law. They both know the legal system. They both should know the ins and outs of it. It just sort of, I'm befuddled as to why the Conservative government just didn't get a grip on this or didn't even bother. Was there no political will? Because the mechanism was definitely there. We got the same mechanism. This man's done it in 6 months.
Well, no, like I said, in 2017, the Conservatives actually got a higher number, so I don't necessarily think there is that much different. We are given just sort of a few bits of evidence here. Like I said, we don't know how many people have been given right to remain.
If you look consistently on the figure, Alex, and on the graph, of the Home Office's own figures, from 2010, it's a downward spiral. It's a downward spiral, and that only picks up this year. And the other thing is work visas, that was announced yesterday, they've gone down 45%. So the grip on the work visas and the student dependents, that's still there. Labour haven't reversed them Tory policies of earlier this year, and they've kicked in. And there's a lot less people coming in this year on visas than there were, say, under Rishi Sunak, which we saw record numbers of over 700,000 coming in a year.
Yeah, don't you worry about that, Harjap. I'm not about to forgive the Conservative Party their ludicrous handling of immigration policy anytime soon, if ever. Let's talk about the gangs. I remember doing an interview once in a previous life of mine, and we were talking about what constitutes these gangs. Who are they? How international they are? How complex they are? And you're saying there the sentences aren't long enough. Now people trafficking is a far bigger money earner than drugs trafficking.
It is.
Right.
Yeah, it's always made more money. So there's more money in people trafficking than there is in drug smuggling. Escobar, Narcos, the lot. John Gotti, they've got nothing on these guys.
Yeah.
They are nothing compared to the people smuggling gangs who have got everyone on the payroll. From border security guards to police force to people in the armed forces. There is no way that me and you can get from Russia all the way to France without having our passport checked once, at least once, right, at a border. There is no way. Try it, I'll try it, you'll try it. We'd be stopped within, hours trying to cross a border. However, how are people getting these gangs and hundreds of people from Russia, from Italy, all the way to France without being checked? We all know what's going on here. These gangs are huge. However, we have to smash the model. Now, the model is that there's always a demand. The demand is there. So you've got to stop the demand and you've got to stop the supply chain. So the supply is boats being put on the coast and these gangs actually advertising on social media. We've seen it. You've seen it. They're on TikTok advertising that they can, this is a service. We're going to take you over. It's going to cost that much.
Yeah.
And it's all organised. No one decides to get up in France one day and say, right, I'm going to find a boat on the coast and just decide to come over. It's all organised and it's all highly, sophisticated. Now, this has got to be done with European cooperation. And that is there now. A lot of countries in Europe have woken up to this and realised, you know what, we've all got to get together. We've got to deal with this together. Sort of spearheaded by Italy. So Italy, the Italian government are pretty much spearheading this and saying, look, we're going to do something about it. We need the French, the Spanish, the Greeks, and everyone to come in and deal with this. And it is sort of happening. So they're trying to disrupt the gangs. Whether they'll be 100% to grab these guys and to grab the top heads of the gangs, I doubt it. But they've got to make sure that once they grab these guys aren't back out in 2 or 3 years, because that's not a deterrent.
But is it not also the case? I've often thought the easiest solution to all of this would be what Italy wanted to do, in part is starting to do, and what Greece has done, which is intercepting the boats and making sure they can't make land. Surely the best thing that would make people smugglers go, well, that's not going to work, is it? Because no one's going to want to get in a boat, is if they know they get in a boat halfway across the channel, it's picked up, taken back to France and told, no, you can't come into UK territorial waters. Sorry, I don't understand why the most obvious of approaches has not been taken.
Well, there's risk in that. So once we start turning boats back, there's risks. If there's a loss of human life, then...
Yeah, but if we're picking them up and taking them one way across the channel, halfway, what's the difference between taking them the other way?
Yeah,
is it more dangerous, picking people up and taking them back to France than it is continuing the journey to the UK?
There have been incidents where people have lost their life, and no government wants that on their hands. No government wants that. So the best thing is to cut it off at source. They know where these boats are manufactured, and they found factories in Germany, in fact, where they were being stored, and warehouses where they were being stored recently last year. So they've grabbed them. They the boats have manufacturing details on them of where they can be traced. So they can find Bin Laden holed up in Pakistan in a house via satellites. And are you telling me for 20 years they don't know where the people smugglers are and how they are? It seems incredulous and unbelievable.
So let's talk about that. Where are these boats being manufactured and the sort of big motors that are put on board? Because my understanding is some of these vessels are being made very deliberately for this purpose in China.
That's right. A lot of them are being made in China. And someone's out there at the moment from the government. So perhaps they can have a word while they're out there part of the deal and say, you know what, we're going to do some deals with you, but you've got to get hold on this problem. Your Chinese intelligence has to tell us where these boats are being made, and you have to go and nab these guys. That's all part of trade deals. This all happens. We often hear trade deals are being made in return for visas. Rishi Sunak used to do that with India. He used to say, right, well, you do a trade deal with us, we'll give you X amount of visas. Priti Patel used to do that. So why can't we do a sort of deal where we say, look to China, we're happy to trade with you, but we have a problem with boats being made that are being used to send illegal immigrants over. We need you to nab these boats, and we need you to sort of destroy them and put these people behind bars. I'm sure if we dangled that sort of bone there in front of them, that China would probably cooperate and say, you know what, yeah, we will cooperate.
I don't think China really need our trade that much compared to, they need to continue to export to us. And I think that probably, I don't know, but I would imagine it's part of sort of shadowy, shady CCP policy that they want us to be flooded with migrants. I think it's probably an act of grey zone warfare.
No, I think every country needs trade. There's no country here that can survive without international trade. But I think that what it is, China would be willing to listen. It all depends now on China's relationship with America, because dynamics change very quickly in world politics. So if China sees, well, hold on, we're about to have some friction with the US, we need to keep the UK on side and France and Italy and Belgium and Spain on side and the EU on side, then it would happen. The EU collectively have to put pressure on. Once again, here's cooperation with the EU where it comes in. If the EU go and say to China, you know, this is a problem, you need to sort this out, China will listen. Because China does not know where its dynamic lies with India. There's friction China has with India with that border, where China are incurring on their border of India and have taken over a few villages in India. They're at sort of loggerheads there through the United Nations. America, Donald Trump has just said, look, I'm going to put more sanctions on China and I'm going to give them a hard time. So China does need allies. And a lot of countries need allies. And I think they will listen. It's about someone starting the conversation. And it's about using the intelligence that we're gathering and saying, well, hold on, this is what we need. In return, we'll give you this. It's a way of the world. It always happens. Give and take, quid pro quo.
Well, you're more optimistic than I am, Harjap. It's really good catching up with you. I really like your insights, especially into the sort of scale of this illicit international industry. We're going to take a short break now. Now, on the subject of China, what about those Chagos Islands? Admiral Lord West of Spithead, what a great name, formerly the First Sea Lord, has said it was difficult to fathom why the UK was jeopardising its strategically important military base on Diego Garcia, as well as its relationship with the US over this fudged deal. We're going to be catching up with the head of the National Security Unit at Policy Exchange after this.
people saying it, but the reality is, as we know, when there have been wildfires, many other places, and in California, some of the issue has been a failure to clear, very dry debris. There's sort of, environmental plans that, the policies where there hasn't been the mass clearing. We've also seen massive issues with the fire department in California, have we not? Where we've seen massive cuts to the police and the fire department. We've also seen huge amount of extra building. There's been concerns fire hydrants haven't been working, a shortage of water in some of the reservoirs.
And at the same time, you've got Rachel Reeves' budget, almost like a boiled frog. It wasn't the immediate sort of market scepticism about it, but it's taken a couple of months, but it's really ticking up. Borrowing costs are going up. She's due in China this week, so Chris Phillips on the show today has come out and said, she shouldn't be leaving the country. Last time a chancellor left the country when borrowing rates were this high, it was quite...
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Hello there. We've been talking a lot about China today, haven't we? Because Rachel Reeves is going over there, I don't know, to negotiate some stuff, to get a better deal for Britain, to grow the economy, because China is so lovely and cuddly and we need them. They're so good. But on that subject, I've never been able to get my little noggin around this whole Chagos Islands thing. I just don't get it. Why, when we've had these islands in the middle of nowhere that we use for a very important geolocated strategic military base, are we suddenly saying to a country that's thousands of miles away from these islands, do you want them? I don't get it. What has gone on there? How did this even come about? Why is the government still hell-bent on doing this, despite ongoing warnings, including from America, that this would be a disaster? Admiral Lord West of Spithead. Lord Spithead. What a brilliant name that is. Anyway, he has said, essentially, that it's utterly irresponsible to surrender UK sovereignty of the Chagos Islands. He should know a thing or two. He's the former First Sea Lord. He said it was difficult to fathom why we would jeopardise this strategically important military base on Diego Garcia, as well as our relationship with the US. Now, anyone who knows China and knows what it wants to do, and anyone who knows that sort of anti-Western axis knows that the thing that matters the most to them are maritime routes. This is why they're building dry ports all around the South American coast, east coast of Africa, anywhere where they can essentially get a foothold in what essentially the main arteries of trade in the world. China are trying to seize control of that territory. Now, when it comes to the Chagos Islands, giving them to Mauritius, who China's quite fond of, they've got a nice little relationship, don't they? Why are we doing it? Who even asked us to do this? Someone who might be able to answer my questions and shine a bit of light on it is Marcus Solars-Hendricks. He is the head of the National Security Unit at Policy Exchange. Marcus, this just kind of, a couple of months ago popped up out of nowhere. All of a sudden it was decided, by the way, we're giving the Chagos Islands to Mauritius, and we've signed a deal to also give Mauritius millions of pounds so we can keep a base on there. And everyone went, you what? How did we get to that point?
Well, thank you for having me. And it's a very good question. As Policy Exchange in our report released today says, there was never a good reason for striking this deal with Mauritius. The Labour government rushed in. It builds on the back of the Conservatives who opened negotiations a year ago, but crucially didn't agree to the conditions put on them by Mauritius. But Labour's come in, and it's seen what is actually an issue of dynamic strategic risk, juggling the pressure that was coming from the Mauritians, but ultimately remaining completely focused on the fact that this is a crucial, as you say, strategic asset in the region. But it's incorrectly perceived this to be an issue of legal compliance. It's taken the International Court of Justice's non-binding legal opinion issued in 2019, and it's interpreted this as something that it needs to do because of international law. However, as you rightly say, what it's really doing, it's an unforced error. It's going to deeply trouble our relationship probably with the incoming Trump administration, and it's going to quite likely harm our national security and our strategic interests if the deal does indeed go ahead.
So I know that, the Conservative government opened up these negotiations, but why? I don't understand. When Mauritius is nowhere near the Chagos Islands, if someone could explain to me why all of a sudden it was decided that we're going to give these to another country who's nowhere even near... I'd understand if these were islands just off the coast of Mauritius, that Mauritius might go, well, that's our territorial water, it's about time we add that back. I just don't understand what the claim even is.
Well, sure, you're quite right, and it's worth mentioning, as you say, that it's thousands of kilometres away from Mauritius. It's actually much closer to the Maldives. When we look at the reasons for why the Conservatives might have opened it, there was the ICJ ruling, there was this sense of building pressure, the international community, there was a vote in the UN General Assembly, lots of countries voted for it, but the crucial issue remains this is a non-binding opinion. So the Conservatives, as I said, they treated this as an issue of political dynamic risk, a situation to be managed. They went through 10 rounds of negotiations. They said that red lines weren't met, so therefore they weren't going to strike the deal. However, Labour's come into government. It's thought that it can't sustain this international pressure. It has different views when it comes to international law that the previous government did, and it's made a poor judgment. But as we said in our report, these developments since, not least the Trump administration, not least the fact that the new Mauritian government has tried to reopen negotiations to extract more cash from the British taxpayer than it already was receiving, estimated to be about 9 billion or something over the 99 years of the lease agreement. This gives a brilliant get-out-of-free-jail card to the British government now to accept it made a mistake and withdraw legitimately and with grace from the agreement before it's too late.
I've got a bit of breaking news, by the way, and I'm going to ask you about this. Sorry to throw this curveball at you, Marcus, but I'm sure you'll have an opinion on this. The breaking news is apparently Britain's gas storage levels are concerningly low. Ooh, right on the coldest day of the year, with less than a week of demand in store, the operator of the country's largest gas storage site said today. Plunging temperatures and high demand for gas-fired power stations are the main factors behind the low levels. That's according to Centrica. The UK is heavily reliant on gas for its home heating and also uses a significant amount for electricity generation. Now, I remember last winter, Marcus, and not a lot was being made of this publicly, but we got into a pretty sticky situation again when it came to how much gas we had in the UK, and we went cap in hand over to Qatar for their LNG. Do you think Rachel Reeves might have to divert her flight to China via Doha?
Well, I mean, let's see. She's indeed been very keen to go to Beijing, so I'm sure that her interests for this weekend lie there. But look, I mean, when it comes to energy, this has been a long-standing issue going through a number of British governments when it comes to their energy strategy. You can look at nuclear, for example, decisions that were made which may have come to our rescue now. Whether or not Labour can get it together and have a much stronger energy strategy, much stronger, may I say, than the current one that they're pursuing when it comes to national security in the Indian Ocean, remains to be seen. But yes, no.
I think we've seen it already. We've seen Ed Miliband in a wind farm playing a ukulele. I think we know exactly what the energy strategy is going to look like. Let's go back to the Chagos Islands, because, you talked about this being discussed at UN level, an ICJ non-binding suggestion, essentially. And we also know, or also suspect, that this plays very well into China's hands. Now, my suspicion would be the one thing that China is very good at is what they say in Cantonese is guanxi, which is networking and using those networks and spheres of influence to impact on policy. We know they're good at spying. We know they're good at lobbying. We know they're good at back channels and creating international pressure and doing deals with other countries. I wonder if there might be the sort of long arm of China over the course of years involved in cajoling the ICJ to reach this decision, which all of a sudden Keir Starmer goes, yay, let's do this. Rachel Reeves is flying out to Beijing, and China must be rubbing their hands together with glee, going, great, we get to have eyes on Western military.
Yeah, I mean, it's a completely correct point. One of the key strategic issues of this whole deal and transferring sovereignty of the Chagos Islands is the fact that the Diego Garcia military base that we joint own with the UK and the US is situated on one of those islands. Now, there's plenty of evidence that China, over the recent years and decades, has been increasing its activity and presence in the Indian Ocean region, as you say, a crucial strategic area. And whilst it's interesting that many officials in the British government have been keen to say that Mauritius is an ally of India, the actual reality is much more complicated than that in the region. The whole region, the smaller states, are caught between Chinese and Indian tussling for influence. Mauritius was the first African country in 2019 to sign a free trade agreement with China. Huawei just got a contract to provide telecommunications. So the fact is that this is not so clear-cut. Any deal which provides an opportunity for China to build influence with the country and to transfer sovereignty over a military base to that country seems a very strange strategic move to me.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more, Marcus. Thank you ever so much. You know, it's interesting. The Chinese were all over the Solomon Islands. They want these little islands and archipelagos. Like I said, they want to control maritime routes. They want to have naval dominance. They're building one of the biggest navies in the world. And you know what? Not only are they going over to sandbanks with Chinese trawlers and scaring off Filipino fishermen when that territory officially belongs to the Philippines, they're making their own islands. Did you know that? China's literally making their own islands. They're getting land and stuff and matter from here and dumping it in the ocean. There we go. We've made that island ours now, sticking their flag on it. So the idea that China's nowhere near the whole Chagos controversy is just for the birds. Let's see if we can quickly squeeze in a call with Jerry, who is in Surrey. Hi, Jerry.
Oh, hi, Alex. Yeah, I just wanted to talk about the net zero debate.
Yeah.
Basically, I mean, there are plenty of papers by well-respected scientists that will prove almost unequivocally that you know the effect of carbon dioxide in the atmosphere is virtually nil, if not totally non-existent. And just to give you an example, a couple of weeks ago, I think you were on Plank of the Week when the subject of the stuff they're adding to cattle feed to stop them.
Oh, Bovair, yeah.
Yes. Now, I believe Mike Graham explained to you that methane was far more powerful as
right. And you're saying it's not?
Well, what is missing is context. Briefly, water vapour is the most powerful greenhouse gas.
Oh.
And it's variable, but I mean, it's usually between 2 and 4% of the atmosphere.
Jerry, I love a science lesson. In fact, I want you to do a lecture, why not, on the BBC about it and change this idea that it's all a settled science. But we do not have the time, but thank you ever so much for your call. Still one more hour to go of the show, so I hope you stay tuned. Go put the kettle on. I am back in just a moment.
the UK. On DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Hello there, welcome back to the show. Now, breaking news just before the other break. Guess what? Britain's gas storage levels are concerningly low. We have less than a week of demand in store. That's according to Centrica, the country's largest gas storage site. Amidst these plunging temperatures and, of course, high demand for gas-fired power stations, we've been churning up and getting through all of our stored gas. And now we've got less than a week left. What does that mean? Are we going to be facing blackouts? I don't know. I think we're going to have to get on the phone to Doha ASAP and say, can we have some of your liquefied natural gas to stick in our storage tanks, and expect Qatar to ride to the rescue. They did so last year, and looks to me like we are in trouble. Oh, the brilliant genius strategy of that idiotic nasally Ed Miliband playing his ukuleles in a field of windworms. Guess what? The wind hasn't been blowing. We don't have enough energy. We're having to dip into our gas storage, and now we've got less than a week left. I'd stock up on candles if I were you. Oh, blimey. What is this government doing? They're just walking us off the edge. It just couldn't get worse, could it? Our economy is absolutely in a mess. We're tanking. We're going over to make deals with communists who hate us. We're running out of gas. I mean, it's like a banana republic at this point. Could it get worse? Actually, don't answer that. I think the answer is yes, it could get a lot worse. Well, let's see. Let's see what Liam Halligan thinks, a brilliant economist, a very dear friend of mine, and one of the few people out there who doesn't just subscribe to lazy groupthink and goes on legacy media going, oh, yeah, Liz must crash the economy, but says, no, hold on, that's not what's happened here. He's a man who understands far more than most people out there all put together, and I'm delighted to welcome him on the show now. Liam, thank you for joining me. I mean, let's start off with this breaking news, actually. Our gas storage levels, less than a week of demand in store. How's that going to add to the economic crisis we're facing?
Well, the UK has had gas storage issues for many, many years. Civil servants across a generation have argued to ministers that it's fine, we can just get the gas from Norway. The longest undersea gas pipeline in the world actually is from Norway to the eastern seaboard of the UK. We can just get gas through interconnectors. We can just get liquefied natural gas, as you say, from Qatar. Increasingly from the United States, we get liquefied natural gas. But we need to build more gas storage, and sort of NIMBYism and basic apathy means that we're not building gas storage. And guess what? When the wind doesn't blow and the sun doesn't shine, as you say, which often happens during the winter, when you need energy more than ever, what do? Well, our nukes are not nearly as good as they were. This is the country that invented civilly a form of EDF. We've been trying to get modular nuclear reactors, in which, you know, our very own Rolls-Royce, proud Derbyshire firm, has pioneered that technology. Will the British government go for it? No. Why not? Get on with it.
Get on with it. I heard that Japan are desperate to get those small modular reactors. Japan knows the thing about nuclear accidents.
Small modular nukes are very, very important, and yet we have the technology in one of our flagship companies, a world-class manufacturer that the whole world knows, and yet Whitehall has constantly put barriers in the way of those small modular reactors. I have no idea why. And what happens when, as I say, the wind isn't blowing and the sun isn't shining and we can't use wind power or solar power, is guess what? We fall back on gas-fired power stations.
I mean, less than a week to go.
Gas-fired power stations, which have to sit idle until the renewables don't work. And if you're only firing up a gas-fired power station every now and then, and you've got all the people there, guess what? The marginal cost of that gas is very, very high. Right. And guess what? The way our rigged energy market works is that the renewable companies, that's the price that they get when they put power into the grid. Right. it's a racket. Our energy market is a racket. Renewables, in my view, do have an important role to play, but we have to get beyond this mania of that they are entirely the future. We have to understand that in this country, there will be very big periods of the year when renewables don't work. We have to have proper backup in the form of baseload nuclear power, replenishing our nuclear fleet. Of course, we've got nuclear power stations coming on soon, but not nearly enough. In terms, I would say, of hydrogen also being a very important energy source, but we continue to rely far too heavily on gas interconnectors from the rest of the world. That is geopolitically extremely naive. Commercially, it's irresponsible, Alex. And this is what happens. We get into a situation where there is a cold snap, and of course this is a cold snap, but it's hardly unexpected.
But it's winter.
We get in a situation where the British government, our power grid, has to pay through the nose for energy, and the rest of the world is laughing at us.
Yeah, I wonder if we're going to have to face some sort of rationing. That'll be fun, won't it? It'll be like the good old days of the 70s.
We'll be cleaning our teeth by candlelight, Alex, but of course you're too young to remember the early 70s.
I am.
Which I unfortunately am not.
I think the British spirit would probably kind of weirdly, sadistically enjoy it on a strange level. Right, let's talk about Rachel Reeves trotting off to China while the markets are in turmoil. First of all, let's talk about the markets and how bad things are out there.
Well, look, I don't want to spread alarm. I don't want to say that the British government is about to default on its debt. But what's very, very clear is that debt prices are reflecting the fact that the markets are increasingly significantly questioning the government's economic strategy. What am I talking about? What was all that gobbledygook about? Let me explain. Now, we hear on the evening news when the Bank of England cuts interest rates, and your borrowing costs are going to come down, say the correspondents. No, they're not. No, they're not. Because actual borrowing costs in the real world for governments and also for mortgage holders, if you want to get a personal loan or a car loan, if a company wants to raise money from a corporate loan to build a new factory or something, they are determined not by the Bank of England. They are determined by financial markets, lenders out there, big institutions, insurance companies, pension funds that have lots of cash, lots of people's savings. They put that into investments. They also put it into what we call sovereign debt. They lend it to governments around the world because they think governments will always pay the money back. They don't get a huge return for lending to a government because it should be, very low risk, particularly for, an advanced industrialized economy like the US, like the UK, like a lot of the continental European countries. But what's been happening over the last 6 months, Alex, and some of us have been banging our heads against the wall talking about this, talking about it to top politicians, talking about it to fellow journalists. No one has wanted to take any notice of what is actually happening. What is happening is that over the last 6 months, as the Bank of England have lowered interest rates from 5.25% last summer down 2 steps of 25 basis points of a quarter of a percentage point where they are now 4.75%, we've seen the Bank of England lower interest rates at the same time. Rather than bringing market rates down, the markets have gone, no, we don't believe you. We're going to push rates up. We're going to put actual rates that count in the real world up. What the Bank of England is saying at this point is mood music. It is not impacting the real cost of borrowing. And that is very, very worrying. The real cost of borrowing, we can look at the 10-year gilt yield. What does that mean? How much it costs the British government to borrow for 10 years, right? Last summer, that was at 3.8%. It's now almost 5%, 4.8% as I look. It went up to 5% the other day. Massive increase, a massive increase while the Bank of England has been bringing rates down. And when the cost of government borrowing goes up, and this is not something that has only happened under Labour, but it's happened more under Labour since the budget of October the 31st, when the cost of government borrowing goes up, the public finances are pulled apart because the government then has to pay more to borrow to keep its spending programs going and its public services going. And to borrow, guess what, Alex? To pay the interest on the debt that it already has.
Yeah.
Rolling over the debt, as we call it. And the debt service bill each year, look, under the Tories, they were massive spendthrifts as well. Taxation was at a 70-year high when the Tories were booted, rightly, as I think, out of office. Taxation was at a 70-year high. Government debt was 100% of GDP, absolutely massive. But Labour, instead of consolidating the public finances, they borrowed a load more money and then gave a load of it to their mates in the public sector unions, gave a load of it to other Labour-supporting interest groups, and the markets. And Rachel Reeves justified that by saying, oh, don't worry, this borrowing we're doing, we're going to put it into projects that will lead to more growth. The economy will get bigger. We'll be able to handle the extra borrowing because a growing economy generates more tax revenue. A growing economy needs less benefit spending, fewer people out of work, less support needed for the economy. But guess what? Who would have thunk it? Big spending Labour policy programmes have not engendered growth. On the contrary, since that October budget, the growth outlook has been terrible. We've had successive monthly GDP numbers that are either flat or contracting. Some people, not entirely inaccurately in my view, are saying we may go into recession, which is when the economy actually gets smaller for over a 6-month period. And if an economy is growing slowly, flatlining, or goes into recession, guess what? It doesn't generate the tax it needs to generate. It needs a lot more spending to keep it going. Borrowing goes up. The markets are now saying, we think the British economy is slowing in an alarming way. We think the public sector sums that Rachel Reeves is presenting are not credible. So we are going to charge the British government more to borrow whatever the Bank of England says, and there is nothing the British government can do about it. So if Rachel Reeves wants to get on a plane to China and get a photo taken with loads of dignitaries and shake loads of hands and act as if nothing's happening, that's fine. But guess what? The markets are watching. And they're thinking, what she should be doing is holding an emergency summit in Downing Street, getting the ministers together, issuing statements saying, we get it, our spending's too high, we're going to rein it in, here are some proper pro-growth policies, deregulatory policies, supply-side policies to get the economy moving. She's doing none of those things. She's thumbing her nose at financial markets, and they're not going to like it. They're going to make her pay. That means they're going to make us pay, because when interest rates set by the Bank of England are going one way and interest rates are set by the market are going in the other way, the markets always win.
Oh, Liam, you really cheered me up. It's been wonderful catching.
I'd rather be gloomy, Alex, than wrong.
No, what I love about you is you give such brilliant, succinct analysis. I don't have an economic bone in my body, but when you talk, it all suddenly makes sense. It becomes crystal clear for a moment. We need you as Chancellor, Liam. One day in a future government, I hope you'll accept that role. Liam Halligan there, economist and journalist, and a man who actually gets it, unlike Rachel Reeves. Apparently she's going around asking everybody for their ideas on what they could do for economic growth. Oh, my goodness, you're the Chancellor. You spent the whole election campaign saying, I've got a plan, it's going to be great. And then as soon as you got into place, said, it's difficult decisions. And, it's just, honest to God, these people, they are beyond useless. How did we end up with this calibre people running the country? Are there not smarter people out there? Are there not people with more integrity out there than that lot with all their nasal issues? I mean, seriously, how is that the best that we can do in Britain? Them. Beggars belief. Now, what they are very good at doing is conniving and covering up. That's right, and I've just heard a little bit of breaking news here, which has the sniff of diversionary tactics. The Home Affairs Committee will question Chair of the Independent Inquiry into Child Sexual Abuse, Professor Alexis Jay, on Tuesday the 21st of January. The Independent Inquiry was launched in 2015 to examine how institutions such as local authorities, religious groups and child custodial facilities had failed in their duty of care to protect children from sexual abuse. The final report was published in October 2022 and made recommendations for wide-ranging reform. So the Home Affairs Committee are going to question her. Now, this is where I smell the diversionary tactic. The session will consider how far the recommendations of the reports have been implemented. It will focus on how institutions have responded to the findings and the relationship between the inquiry and government. Well, do you know what that sounds like to me? That sounds like the Labour Party going, what we're going to do is point the finger of blame at our predecessors. What we're going to do is have an independent inquiry into an independent inquiry to see how much the previous government listens to the findings of the independent inquiry, instead of having an inquiry into, oh, that's right, our hand in the matter. Now, call me a sceptic, but I think I can smell the spin on that pretty clearly. So there you are. There is some breaking news for you. The Home Affairs Committee will question Professor Alexis Jay, who did the inquiry in 2015 into grooming gangs and how institutions such as local authorities, religious groups and child custodial facilities failed in their duty of care to protect children from sexual abuse. OK, going to take a short break now, but when I come back, we're going to talk a little bit about things going on in the rest of the world, especially the good old Shamima Begum. You remember her. She could be free from Syrian prison within days as guards holding her, and thousands of other ISIS terrorists have come under attack. And all of them could be out and about again. We're going to be speaking to Mesa Gifford, former British volunteer fighter in Syria. Also going to ask him about what he thinks is going on with Trump, apparently possibly going over to meet Vladimir Putin to discuss Ukraine, because guess what? Mesa fought there too. All of that coming up after this.
Sleepy Joe Biden proved to everyone that he has what it takes to be president. So now we have a new victim to defeat, Kamala Harris, L-Y-I-N apostrophe. Take a look at what happened. In Springfield, they're eating the dogs. The people that came in, they're eating the cats. Many people have told me that God spared my life for a reason.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Hello there, welcome back to the show. Now, things have been kicking off in Syria somewhat. Assad and his wife, ex-wife, whatever, in exile over in Moscow. Well, she for now. And it's all been falling rather apart in Syria. Unfortunately, that means that a load of even worse people, ISIS terrorists who are under lock and key from the previous regime, could potentially be let out within a matter of days. Let's speak to Mesa Gifford, former British volunteer fighter in Syria and author of Fighting Evil, the ordinary man who went to war against ISIS. Mesa, I mean, what is the level of issue that we might now face if all of these ISIS fighters, former ISIS fighters, are given their freedom?
Well, it does several things. One is there are dozens, potentially, of British citizens or former British citizens that could come back to the UK. That would strain our judicial system. There's how are we going to get witnesses from Syria and the infrastructure put together to actually effectively try these people in the UK? The real danger is that actually they'll be out within a year, because they could be effectively tried under certain legislation, like joining a terror group and all the rest of it. But the actual crimes that they committed out in Syria are going to be very difficult to actually put in front of a judge. Much broader, though, is the thousands of other prisoners that could potentially be released. There's a real danger here that the US government is very much putting the feelers out to sort of say, we're giving up on Syria. And the big danger there is the local people, the people who defeated the Islamic State and are currently imprisoning these people. We should be supporting them. By pulling away from them, we trusted them to get rid of ISIS. We should also trust them to deliver justice by putting these people on trial in Syria. So that's what I would hope to see happen here.
So you'd like to see the West being a lot more interventionary, for want of a better phrase, rather than sort of taking a step back. I mean, I find that the whole Syria situation is so impossible to understand. My gist is that I think there's around, 1,500 odd tribes, clans, factions, all fighting for territory. It's a sort of big smorgasbord of different interests over in that country. How on earth could it ever be controlled? Who should we be, how should we be interacting?
Well, the main partner on the ground for Britain and America is the SDF, the Syrian Democratic Forces. This is the group that came together, that believe in progressive values, democracy. In a very conservative region, it's very refreshing what they've been talking about over the last 10 years. Things like gender equality, talking about democracy. As I said, they were the ones that defeated the Islamic State. I fought alongside them in Raqqa and many other places in northern Syria. I saw them, the healing effect of what they were trying to build. The SDF itself is a multi-ethnic, multi-faith fighting force. And as I said, if it would be a shame to rescue these people from Syria when they haven't spent a day in court in Syria where they committed their crimes. By taking agency away from local people, by bringing them back to the UK, we strain our own judicial system. We put tremendous strain on MI5 and the police, the wider police, who are already under a lot of strain with the amount of terrorists that they're following. The idea of bringing more from Syria without actually coming up with a much better plan, a local plan that helps local people, is setting us up for a disaster.
The SDF, how big are they? How much of a force could they be? Because, like I said, there seems to be so many different factions here. If we gave them support, have they got what it takes to be able to conquer some of these darker powers?
Well, it's just if you narrow the real power centres down, there's the sort of Turkish-backed rebels in the far north. You then have the other rebels, the FSA, which is largely HTS, which is a former jihadist, they call themselves a former jihadist organisation. How much they've reformed, we're going to have to wait to see. They're the new power brokers in Damascus. They're the ones that toppled Assad, who was the other power in the region until recently. There is another path. It's not a binary choice between the rebels and the regime. I've always argued that a third way was necessary, and that third way has always been the SDF. The SDF control about sort of 30% of the country. About 80% of the oil of the country is controlled by them. They exist in a very multicultural area of Syria, but is predominantly Kurdish. And they're the only people in Syria that talk openly about democracy and equal rights, freedom, equality, that sort of stuff. And these are the ones that Britain and America found it very easy to support way back when I was fighting alongside them against ISIS. And it was together with the coalition, with the wider international community, that these local people defeated the Islamic State. They imprisoned 70,000 jihadist fighters and their wives and families in vast camps, which the West has been funding, but they haven't come up with a political solution for the people of eastern Syria. In fact, on many occasions, they've threatened to abandon them. And who are we abandoning these people to? HDS, to jihadists. And there's a real danger that the war could kick off again. The SDF has 100,000 soldiers under arms. It's a vast army. And if we don't come up with a plan to put these people into prison, these jihadists, but also support the locals that we want to support, there's a real chance that the war will kick off again and the civil war will drag on for many more years to come.
Talk to me now about Russia, Ukraine, because you've been out fighting there as well. Donald Trump has suggested that Vladimir Putin's invited him for a sit-down, cosy chat, and that he's minded to go and speak to Putin about a way of settling things in Ukraine. He's been very consistent on that. A lot of people have been worried about what that might mean, whether he might sort of succumb to territory grabs by Putin, might sort of allow the West to roll over and have their bellies tickled by Russia, and Russia will be rewarded for their hostile and aggressive action. Although I've sort of had it suggested to me by the people who are close to Trump that quite the opposite is true. He might say one thing on the outside, but behind the scenes he's quite insistent that Zelensky is backed to the hilt and thinks that he can take on Trump. Do you think that a chat between Putin and Trump would be welcome or ominous?
I think it's welcome. I think the trouble is, as Reagan said, you can get peace today. The fastest way to peace is to surrender. And there's been many people on both sides arguing for that for a while. Donald Trump just wants to see the war end. The people in his camp see China as a far greater threat than Russia. But Donald Trump, I think, in the last few months is starting to wise up to a reality. And the reality is that the China issue, the Russia issue, and all the rest of it are linked. There is such a thing as an axis of evil on this planet. It includes countries like Iran, North Korea, China, Russia. These countries are working together. They want to see American and Western power generally diminish so they can exploit the vacuum that would give. And I think Ukraine very much is the front line in this new Cold War that we find ourselves in. I really hope that Donald Trump comes into office and takes this incredibly seriously. And most importantly, if Russia does not return the land that it took after the 2022 invasion, then I think they should double down and start supporting Ukraine. But we're just going to have to wait to see exactly what Donald Trump is thinking, because he's incredibly hard to read at the moment for some reason.
He is indeed keeping his cards close to his chest, and perhaps rightly so. Mesa, it's always great catching up with you. Mesa Gifford, their former British volunteer fighter in Syria. Mesa had a really big job in the city and then just decided he wanted to go and save the world instead on the front line. He's amazing. He's like a sort of hero mercenary. There should be statues of Mesa around the world. Right, we're going to take a short break now and talking about matters America and Donald Trump. What is going on over in Los Angeles? Wildfires seizing some of the most extraordinary addresses and postcodes in California. Sunset Boulevard up in flames, wreaking tremendous havoc. Not just that, I think 10 lives have now been lost. Almost 200,000 people under evacuation orders. We're going to be speaking to a woman who has lost her house to the wildfires after this.
across the UK. On DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Well, hello, welcome back to the show. Now, you had to be living under a rock to not know that there are furious, raging fires tearing through Los Angeles as we speak, torching entire neighborhoods, sending thousands fleeing. 179,000 people are being told to evacuate their homes. These fires have burnt through nearly 30,000 acres, have destroyed nearly 2,000 structures already. The entire Golden State coated in ash and smoke. Scenes are being described as apocalyptic. And of course, there's a lot of newspaper headlines about, oh, what celebrities are affected, which mansions belonging to the great and the good of Hollywood have been engulfed in fire. But what is it really like for people living there, who wake up in the night or during the day and suddenly find that that fire that they could see in the distance is on their doorstep? How long do they have to react? How do they feel when they come back to find that their street is essentially in cinders? Let's speak now to Aaliyah Rosa. She has lost her house to the wildfires. Aaliyah, tell me about when you first realised you were at home. This must have been in the news. You could see trouble on the horizon. I don't know, but when did you suddenly think, this is coming for me?
Honestly, it's so devastating what's happening, and so many people lost their houses, including me, and so many people just injured. And as you said, over 200,000 people already been evacuated. When I heard the news and when I saw the smoke and the fire, I literally took my underage son and drove towards San Diego, and we've spent the whole day in the traffic because everybody were trying to get out. Roads were closed. It was really like, you know, a horror movie, but unfortunately it wasn't a movie, it was a reality. It's still a reality, and it's just very sad, and it's a huge tragedy for all of us. And I don't really believe that Los Angeles will be the same as it was before, you know.
Where did you stay when you had to suddenly flee your own home and go to Santiago? Where did you actually stay? What sort of accommodation did you find?
So I basically just booked Airbnb. It was just in a second, and I booked random house, and I just while I was driving, I was booking houses and just came here with my son. And invited some of my friends who couldn't find place to stay because so many people just lost their homes, their beds, and all the schools are closed. And it's just terrible what's happening right now.
Have you managed to go back and see your house?
You know, to be honest, as a former secret agent, I analyzed the whole situation, and it's such a chaos and panic. And the first question which arose in my head, how is it even possible when I look at the map, and let's be logical here, how is it possible to have from 5 to 8 fires in different distances, let's say from Palisades fire to Runyon Canyon fire? It's a huge distance. There is no way the spark of the fire could blow with the wind over there. So to me, it looks like there were some people or somebody were trying to really burn the city down in different places. And as you know, for example, the homeless situation is really bad in Los Angeles. It's over 75,000 homeless people on the streets who actually trying to warm themselves by burning some things outside. And obviously, due to the wind, all the sparks can go to any other directions. And I'm not talking about some, people with mental issues who actually just like trying to do even more fires to, due to this like chaos and all that, because of looters as well, and people right now stealing things from houses which are still, abandoned by the homeowners. And this is what's happening right now. So I don't believe this is just a global warming, as the governor Newsom says. I do believe that they knew that Santa Ana winds are coming. They predicted that. according to weather forecast, but yet nobody could fill up the fire hydrants. Nobody took care about cleaning the forest floor, even though Donald Trump in 2019, you remember, he's mentioned to the Governor Newsom that they need to clean up the forest floor because this is essential, because all these like dry leaves, they just like they burn as a paper, even worse. So that's all these things said that was possible to do something for people, and yet nobody did anything. And besides, the mayor just cut off the budget for like 17 million, while a couple of days ago America sent 500 million to Ukraine. And while people here are suffering and they simply do not have any other help. This is very devastating.
I want to pick up on something you said earlier, because it sort of made the hairs stand up on the back of my neck. You said as a former secret agent, you engage in analysis. You've looked at the spread of the inferno and asked questions about how on earth has it been able to rapidly get across so much of Los Angeles and so quickly. And of course, Gavin Newsom, Governor of California, saying, oh, well, this is all climate change. And you've talked about there being people who might have caused fires either deliberately so they could loot properties, or potentially homeless people inadvertently creating catastrophe. You've spoken as well about a mass negligence at authority level. Could there be malicious intent involved as well?
I do believe so, because when I did the research, I found out that apparently Santa Ana winds, they blow every year, and they basically have this situation when they can spread the wind and the fire possibly. Even in 2011, actually the speed of the wind was 167 miles per hour, and right now I checked them up. It is right now 127, which means much less. And yet we have this situation. So, it just seems to me that somebody trying to sabotage this whole situation before the Donald Trump inauguration, which is happening just in a few days.
Would you potentially put that down to some sort of foreign activity?
I do. I mean, this is my opinion, of course, but I do believe so. I do not believe this is the global crisis or something like that. I think somebody intentionally really burned these areas.
Gosh, that's quite a revelation. What happens now? I mean, what happens now for you personally? What is your plan, knowing that your own house has been lost?
That's exactly the next step, right? So all these people lost their houses. And 4 months ago, mostly of the insurance coverage basically canceled the coverage for the fires. And it means that all these people, they just lost houses. That's it. Like, there is no insurance coming to you. So it's like there's nothing you can really do. And again, isn't it like, this is not a coincidence, correct? Like, this is exactly what happened in Maui, just like recently, the Maui fires, when it just burned down so much, and insurance obviously didn't cover anything. It was exactly the same situation like what we have right now here. And somebody, like, other landlords just started to buy this land for a very cheap price. As you know, Palisades, Malibu, and Hollywood Hills, this is the most expensive areas in the United States. So somebody probably potentially trying to put down the price for the land, burn all these houses, despite to all the prices like over $20-30 million, and just will buy this land for almost nothing.
Who could be behind that? Who would want to do that?
That's a great question. I would love to know it myself.
It does seem the sort of chain of events is alarming and needs to be looked into. But the idea that there could be collusion, there could be interference, that this isn't just a catastrophic act of God, especially the sort of sequencing of the decisions taken by insurance companies before this incident happened. What should people do now if they are in Los Angeles?
Well, I strongly advise in my social media in the beginning, just like yesterday when I was packing and just leaving my house. First of all, take your documents and the most important things. Do not overload your car, your vehicle. Put as much gas as you can into vehicle because, again, we don't know what will happen later. And just to drive towards I particularly choose like San Diego because it was the only one road which was kind of like open, so we drove this way. But I know a lot of my friends who took the plane and they flew to Nevada, Las Vegas, and other states. And also the most important, keep yourself calm, and especially children, because due to this chaos and this mess, people can do very rapid decisions which they maybe not like correct, so just be calm. I know it's a difficult situation. I know we lost a lot of things and efforts and money and health as well. The air of the city is very polluted right now. It's impossible to even breathe. I have a cold. The second day I can't sleep properly. It's almost 5 a.m. in Los Angeles. So it's just trying to bring people attention, not to be manipulated by media or by other people, and stay calm. This is really important.
Aaliyah, you've answered my questions, but also set so many other questions going off in my mind, and I thank you for that. I thank you for sort of putting into place here in the UK a different view on what is going on here, other than perhaps everyone banging the drum for climate change. And I really, really sincerely hope that you find sanctuary and comfort, and you can help others. It's been wonderful talking to you. My greatest sort of sympathy to you for losing your own house in these wildfires. Thank you ever so much. Fascinating. Former secret agent pointing out not only the mass negligence, but the sequence of events with insurance companies changing policies months before this happened, and the idea that perhaps these fires have been set deliberately. By whom? For what purpose? It does send a shiver down your spine. Right, let's take a call now. Carl in Newport. Hi, Carl.
Hey, Alex, how are you doing?
I'm very well. How are you doing?
Yeah, very well, thank you. Just in regards to the forest fires in California, I think Gavin Newsom has a lot to answer for. Like, we're a little bit crazy with nature in the UK. Like, we got to have ecologists on site to look for golden crested newts and whatnot. But whenever we work in woodland, you have to use something called aspen oil, an oil derived from trees, basically, so you don't poison the ground. Now, that's one thing that Newsom has put in place. But since Trump was last in power, he's also banned any chainsaws being used, which are fuel, so two-stroke. So you've got to have battery equipment. Right. Now, the forests haven't been being maintained, which is why the fires spread so bad.
So basically, you're saying his sort of his eco policy, because you're a tree surgeon, you know a thing or two about forestry management. You're saying that this could be a direct result of there being a ban on exactly the equipment people need to maintain those forests.
Exactly.
Wow.
Yeah, he did it under the last Trump administration, and I was saying to my friends then, you watch in 4 or 5 years' time, they say it's climate change and it's the worst that's ever happened because they're not managing the forests. And just to go on about net zero, just for 1 second, if I may, we have over 3 billion trees in this country. Each tree can absorb 21 kilos of carbon. Now, when I last looked, we emitted 406 million tons, which if you add in zero on the end, is 4.6 billion. And we have the potential to absorb 6 billion kilos of carbon from the trees alone in the UK. So we're already below net zero.
Wow. I didn't know that. It's been absolutely fascinating talking to you, Carl. I mean, I love it when we get callers like you who actually know what they're talking about because they work in that profession, and you, they're predicting years ago that this tragedy in Los Angeles could well happen as a result of terrible policy making there. Carl, thank you ever so much for your call. If you want to be like Carl and you want to have a chit-chat with me, then please dial this number, 03444 99 1000. It's your network rate and all the rest of it, so it doesn't really cost anything. You can use that number to send me a WhatsApp or leave me a voice note, 87222 on the text. Put talk before your message. I'm back after this.
to one of Keir Starmer's, speaking to sort of Downing Street people before Christmas, and they reckon the Prime Minister genuinely thinks there's a 1 in 3 chance, 3 to 1 chance, so 25% chance that Nigel Farage is going to be the next Prime Minister. And you just think, if that's what
so the Prime Minister thinks that.
I mean, it's pretty. Yeah, they think he's going to be up against. He thinks he's going to be up against a right-wing populist force.
Yeah.
He just doesn't know who it's going to be yet. Either it's going to be Reform, and they keep their act together. They're being pretty good.
Sleepy Joe Biden proved to everyone that he has what it takes to be president. So now we have a new victim to defeat, Kamala Harris, L-Y-I-N apostrophe. Take a look at what happened. In Springfield, they're eating the dogs. The people that came in, they're eating the cats. Many people have told me that God spared my life.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Hello there. Let's hit up the phone line, shall we, and speak to Michael, who is in Birmingham. Hi, Michael.
Hello. It's the first time I've actually seen you, let alone talk to you, so I do apologise.
Oh,
but I've been absolutely astounded at the way you've spoken about things, and the humorous way you come across is just a breath of fresh air.
Oh, well, thank you.
I lived in Australia for a few years where exactly the same thing was going on. And it wasn't people setting fire to woods, and it wasn't climate change. It was actually in Australia, as is in LA, I'll come to that in a moment, because of the lack of preparation. Now, in Australia, they used to put moats around areas of wildfire that they knew were going to blow up. And, oh, crikey, I can hear myself now.
Don't you worry, you're coming across crystal clear here. You just carry on giving us your information.
Okay. Right, so what happened some years ago was that the moats stopped being built on the basis of the damage to animals in the area. And it was the political correct lobby that stopped them doing that. So when they stopped doing that, you know, because of voles, moles, whatever you want to call it, the wildfires got out of hand. And in LA, this has happened again, exactly the same as in Australia. It's exceptionally hot and it's exceptionally low in humidity. And if they had of, what they do is they tend to go out and put the fires out.
Yeah.
The problem is that the LA Fire Service are very, very good at it because they're used to it. But what they do when they put the fires out, they leave a lot of dead wood.
Right.
So what happens with that dead wood? It's now like more to burn.
Right, it's like
so
kindling.
It gets bigger and bigger and bigger. Each time you do that, you should just let it burn itself out by creating a moat.
Right, so you let this sort of fire go through all of its different phases, so it's completely razed to the ground, like farmers sometimes do with fields to regenerate them, but you sort of section it off with a moat.
It has to do it because nature has it that way. They've built houses near it.
Yeah.
For goodness sake.
There's some
what
funny
are they doing
things.
putting houses next to it?
Really funny things going on, because you're talking to me there about the moats in Australia that all of these sort of eco-nature lovers have said, oh, we can't do this for the animals. And then all of a sudden, wow, guess what? The wildfires go out of control. We had Carl earlier from Newport, who is a tree surgeon, who said as well, there's been regulations about stuff that people who work in forestry management can use over in Los Angeles. So you can't use a petrol-powered, for climate change saw anymore.
It's ridiculous.
You use a battery one, and so people aren't managing the forest. You've also got this situation where President Trump said you've got to get rid of all the sort of dry leaf from the forest floor years ago, and it wasn't done. And it reminds me of something that's gone on in Europe, right? Something else that's been blamed on climate change, which is all of that mass flooding. You remember those mass floods in Valencia? And also flooding even in Wales, right? I think it was the Rhondda. And what connected those? oh, for environmental purposes, we actually removed all of the dams. We removed dams. And then we had floods, and then people go, oh, well, it's climate change. And you think, the way that this is climate change is mad nutter eco-policy is the thing causing the devastation. Not the global warming or whatever it is. It's madness. Michael, thank you ever so much. Thank you for your inaugural call as well to my show. It's always lovely having a newbie on board. Now, welcome to Good Ship, Alex. Let's speak now to Phil, who is in Hertfordshire. Hi there, Phil.
Good afternoon, Alex. Good afternoon. Just thinking about these fires. I mean, things don't just spontaneously catch alight. You've got to have a source of ignition. I mean, like, for grass to catch on fire, your atmosphere is going to have to be around 300 degrees C. Then it might spontaneously combust. So there's going to be someone's dropped a cigarette, there's a glass bottle being smashed and the grass is magnifying. Yes, heat will dry the substance out quicker, which will allow it to burn and catch light quicker. But as for the climate zealots saying, oh, yes, it's the climate and things is spontaneously catching alight, they don't. You have to have a source of ignition.
Yeah, I mean, this is it. And this is actually what Alia Rosa was saying, a former secret agent, saying that basically, and that the spread of them as well, there has to have been, whether inadvertently or directly, probably a human cause to a lot of these, not just, oh, the magic environment and climate change, but and I was asking her whether she thought there was a malevolent hand in all of this, and she said she would not rule it out. Well, it's deeply worrying, isn't it? Phil, thank you ever so much for your call. Had brilliant calls today. Look who's here.
Yeah.
Hi, Ian.
Do you know, how are you?
I'm all right. I've just come back from holiday. It's all kicked off when I was abroad, didn't it?
I think you went to Margate again. That's your favourite. Beano to Margate, Alex Phillips and Margate, intrinsically linked.
I want to go to the UK's biggest Wetherspoons is on the beach at Ramsgate. I'm
I think it is.
I've never been, but that is very
all
high on my
Wetherspoons
list.
are a bit large. You could stage a football match at most of them. They're
I
pretty
love a
massive,
good spoons.
Spoons is all right.
Other pubs are available.
Indeed, yes. Yeah. It's funny with those fires. Well, it's not funny in that respect, obviously. They've, as you mentioned, arrested one person, and I wonder if there's going to be more of that, because that often happens, doesn't it? You know, pyromaniacs do look for places.
Yeah, but what sent shivers down my spine, right? We had a former secret agent on. She was a former KGB spy, actually, and her own house has been engulfed in this. And she said she has looked at all of the data. She's looked at wind direction. She's looked at wind speed compared to previous years. She's sort of cross-referenced this with the spread of the fire, the directions of the fire. And she's like, it doesn't make sense. And people would have known the Santa Ana winds were coming, which is the ones that I think don't blow sort of from offshore, inshore with cooling ocean breeze, but the other direction. And these are sort of meteorologically very predictable.
Okay.
And she was suggesting, essentially, that this has been done, that people knew that this was going to happen. This has been done deliberately.
But who would have known? I mean, residents presumably would have known.
The Chinese like flying a weather balloon over, don't they? No, but look, if you had, you know, top people in your country, and you wanted to create havoc in America, you'd think, OK, when it's the right season for forest fires, let's trigger some forest fires. I mean, it'd be sort of, you know...
So, like, are you saying the government started?
Well, no, she doesn't know who did it.
Or is she saying that?
No, she's not saying anybody in particular, but is suggesting that this could be of malicious origin. And you could kind of think to yourself, if you wanted to devastate a country, when the climate's right for wildfires, you just have people... Do you remember the wildfires in Greece? I remember someone telling me then that there was sort of suggestion that there were people deliberately instigating them.
And there were also, or even just, you know, chancers and arsonists that kind of get off on that kind of stuff.
And then want to loot houses.
And they'll go for an area where they know there are normally fires, because when this first started,